Suddenly, the creature's characteristic stench assailed his nostrils. Li Diam's eyes snapped open. Staring back at him was the monster's grotesque face. Right in front of his face. Li Diam flinched, his eyes wide as he stared into the monster's eyes. The stench still lingered in his nostrils. Tu's mother's eyes glowed blood red. Li Diam held his breath. Then, he made a quick decision. He bit his tongue. Then spat the blood at Tu's mother. Caught off guard, Tu's mother staggered backward, clutching her face in pain. Li Diam's Han sword was still embedded in her body. Li Diam watched as the creature trembled, clutching its face. He had heard that blood from the tip of the tongue was effective against monsters. This was the first time he had witnessed it firsthand. It actually worked. Good. He couldn't miss this opportunity. Without hesitation, he lunged at Tu's mother, aiming for her head. Tu's mother's eyes suddenly snapped open. Through the gap in her arm, she saw him coming. And she leaned back to dodge. She staggered backward, her feet scraping against the floor. Li Diam didn't give Tu's mother a chance to recover. He lunged again, the sharp knife in his hand aimed at her head. At that moment, a scream rang out. "Mom!" Li Diam flinched and pulled back the knife. He spun around in midair, delivering a kick straight to Tu's mother's chest. The small, frail body flew backward, crashing into a wooden cabinet. Tu walked in, calling out to her mother, her voice trembling. She seemed to be holding a gun. Tu's face was pale, her body shaking with fear. Tears streamed down her face. She was trying her best to suppress her fear as she raised the gun, pointing it at Li Diam. "Don't hit my mom," she pleaded, her voice childish. Li Diam was startled and looked at her in surprise. "Where did you get that gun?" He instinctively activated Crimson 1/, even though she had a gun. Tu's danger level was only white. Once he had confirmed that. Li Diam walked towards Tu. He looked sternly at her and asked, "Where did you get the gun?" Tu didn't expect Li Diam to walk toward her like that. "Stay back," she said, her voice trembling. "I'll shoot." Li Diam ignored her and continued walking. Tu's mother suddenly lunged, roaring as she attacked Li Diam from behind. Without hesitation, Li Diam lifted his leg and delivered a powerful kick to the frail woman's body. Tu's mother flew backward. Li Diam watched as she lay sprawled against the wall. This demon seemed much weaker than before. Perhaps it had been weakened from fighting for so long. Tu sobbed, her eyes squeezed shut. Her whole body racked with despair. She squeezed the trigger, but nothing happened. She pulled the trigger again and again, but the gun wouldn't fire. Tu opened her eyes and looked at the gun in her hand. No matter how hard she tried, she couldn't make it fire. Li Diam walked over and took the gun from her. It had been easy, of course, to take it from a child. Li Diam looked at the gun, his finger moving slightly. Then, he pulled the trigger. A loud bang rang out. As the bullet flew into the air, Tu collapsed to the ground, her body trembling as she looked at Li Diam. Li Diam stood there, unmoved, and said, "You didn't take the safety off." At that moment, Tu's mother suddenly got up and staggered toward Li Diam. "Spare my daughter," she pleaded. Li Diam stood protectively in front of Tu, holding out his arm to stop her. "Tu, go to your room," he said. "I need to talk to your mother." Tu looked at her mother. Her eyes red and swollen from crying. Tears streamed down her face. She clearly didn't want to leave. But Tu's mother had regained her gentle expression. She even looked sad. She looked at Tu and said with a smile, "Good girl, go to your room." Before Tu could respond, Li Diam took her arm and led her to her room. On the other side of the door, Tu pounded frantically, shouting, Diam, please don't kill my mom." Diam, her desperate pleas, rang in his ears. Li Yan closed the door. After closing the door, he lifted his leg and kicked the lock hard, causing it to be misaligned. There was no way to open it. Tu frantically slammed the door and cried out for her mother. Wah, mommy." Tu stood up weakly and asked. "Why do you have to bother us? I just want to stay and take care of my daughter." Li Yan said coldly, "Auntie. Today, I will definitely see you off. Whether you believe it or not, I will find someone to take care of Tu." Tu's mother sternly shouted. "You want to put her in an orphanage?" Li Yan's breathing was a little chaotic. But, his expression remained as indifferent as ever. Li Yan said, "Don't worry about this, Auntie. It's better for Tu to be in an orphanage than to wait for death. In my opinion, you're also involved in this mess. Just for your own life. You have no right to lecture me. Let's just see who is stronger. The pupils of Ah-Tu's mother contracted sharply. What do you mean? She didn't understand what Li Yan was saying. She subconsciously stepped back a little. Her eyes were filled with fear and doubt. You want to take my soul? Li Yan let out a few labored breaths. He took out the nine-headed bird remnant scroll and held it in front of him, and said, "It's not me, it's it." Ah-Tu's mother stared at the woman, printed on the gold-embroidered card, and said, "They are all the same. I can agree to your request, but I have one condition." Li Yan forced a smile and said, "If we fight again. It seems like my chances of winning are quite high. You still want to make a deal with me?" Ah-Tu's mother whispered in agreement. But in her words, there was no hiding the determination within them. "You're not wrong. I have no right to make a deal with you. But I still want you to swear that you will help me continue to take care of Ah-Tu." As she said these words, Ah-Tu's mother's eyes were frighteningly cold. After all, Ah-Tu was all she had. Li Yan's face grew uglier. But he still tried to maintain a calm demeanor and a clear head. He said, "I can't. I'm telling you for the last time. No matter what, I will find a way to take care of Ah-Tu." Believe it or not, Ah-Tu's mother bent down silently. And Li Yan also fell silent in thought. After all, that one stab from Ah-Tu's mother into his waist had left him seriously injured. There was a limit to how much he could endure. After a long time, the wound on his side gradually stopped bleeding. Such a deep wound was truly bizarre. Suddenly, he grabbed the knife and charged at Ah-Tu's mother, as if he had no patience to wait any longer. Ah-Tu's mother, who was lost in thought, now emanated a chilling aura. Ah-Tu's mother suddenly let out a loud roar. Her entire body seemed to be engulfed in blood-red energy, as if she was burning the last bit of her life force to do the best she could for the daughter she had loved all her life. It was as if blood was flowing from Ah-Tu's mother's eyes as she flew backwards into the air. Her entire being seemed to be enveloped in a fiery blaze, a sinister reddish-black flame. Then, the fire died down, and a faint smoke lingered around Ah-Tu's mother. Li Yan cautiously approached the figure. The pungent odor was no longer present. From Ah-Tu's mother's mouth, a faint wisp of smoke was escaping. It resembled a soul. A look of profound relief washed over Ah-Tu's mother's face, as if she had finally fulfilled her life's last wish. A gentle smile graced her lips. Li Yan held the nine-headed bird remnant scroll in his hand and silently gazed at the woman before him. After her soul had departed, the woman's body slumped backward. The Han sword remained embedded in her abdomen, protruding from beneath her. Blood had seeped out, staining a corner of the room. She was gone. But it was a blessing in disguise. Li Yan's expression was solemn this time, although dangerous. His goal had been achieved. He raised the remnant scroll and stared intently at it. The scroll seemed to emit a red glow, slowly transforming. The figure depicted within became even more lifelike. The familiar, raspy voice spoke once more. "You have awakened the remnant soul of the nine-headed bird. You have completed the most crucial part of this Yanluo event." This time, from Ah-Tu's mother's forehead, something resembling red blood slowly rose. It hovered for a moment before merging into the nine-headed bird remnant scroll. Li Yan's entire body lit up, engulfed in crimson flames. But he felt no heat whatsoever. The voice continued. "You have earned the right to end this Yanluo event. Within 10 minutes. Decide whether to end it or not. If you choose not to, you must complete all the requirements of the event for Yanluo to return to the real world. The current requirement you haven't fulfilled is to reach the 7th platform of the Nine Dragons Arena. Failing to do so will affect your final reward." The nine-headed bird within the remnant scroll was transforming, becoming almost tangible. The golden color on it gradually shifted to a crimson hue. Li Yan pondered in silence, his gaze fixed on the remnant scroll in his hand. He then glanced at the woman lying motionless on the ground. On the ground, a face with a slight smile, as if finally at peace. Li Yan frowns. It's not time yet. So he refuses to end it. The voice says, "Target has been eliminated. The crucial part of the Hell's event The right to end this hell's event has been obtained. Once the opponent chooses to end it, your event is considered a failure. You will return immediately. Opponent refuses to end this hell's event. Suddenly, the voice adds, putting your fate in someone else's hands is the most foolish thing, executor. In a luxurious VIP room, a man leans back on the sofa, drinking alone. He sets his glass down on the table and grabs a bottle, pouring more liquor into his glass. Another bottle on the table is empty, along with several others, all of the same brand. The man stares at the liquor in his glass. Suddenly, he jumps to his feet and throws the glass across the room. Liquor splashes across the floor. The bottles on the table clatter. An empty bottle teeters on the edge of the table, liquor dripping down from its mouth. He chuckles softly and mutters, "All right. Let's play this game to the end." Back at Ah Su's house, after taking care of everything, Li Yan, being incredibly kind, takes off his bloodstained jacket and covers Ah Su's mother's face with it. Then, he hurriedly kicks open the door to the room where he locked Ah Su inside. As soon as he enters the room, Li Yan finds it difficult to breathe. He should have chosen a different room. Li Yan holds his breath as he sees the young girl huddled on the floor, hugging herself. Beside her are several decomposing corpses, some already half decayed, lying in the bathtub. Li Yan slowly walks in. Ah Su, at this moment, has a blank expression on her face. It's as if she's soulless, just hugging herself. She knows her mother is dead. Li Yan suppresses the unease in his heart and walks towards Ah Su. He kneels on one knee and asks softly, "Do they have the gun?" Ah Su doesn't answer. Out of habit, Li Yan reaches out to pat Ah Su's head. Suddenly, Ah Su reaches out with her tiny hands and grabs Li Yan's hand tightly. With all her hatred and rage, she bites down hard on the back of his hand. Tears stream down her face. Li Yan looks at Ah Su sadly. This reaction is understandable. After all, he killed the mother she loved most. However, Ah Su's current state pains him even more. No, absolutely not. He can't let Ah Su grow up consumed by hatred. The taste of blood fills her mouth right now. Besides hating the person in front of her and biting his hand as hard as she can't do anything else. Li Yan sighs and reaches out with his other hand to gently stroke her head. He says softly, "Come with me." Time passes slowly. Li Yan takes Ah Su to the Funing building. He plans to find a way to take care of her. Leaving her in that house full of corpses wouldn't be good for her. Ah Su is brought to the room in the Funing building that red ghost prepared for Li Yan. She's given a bath and clean clothes. Li Yan leans against the wall, watching Ah Su walk out, and says, "Stay here for now. You'll figure out how to get you out of the camp." The girl vehemently refuses. However, she's been crying so much that her voice is hoarse. "Don't bother. I don't want to see you anymore." Contrary to her resentment, Li Yan is somewhat amused. He grins at Ah Su and says, "All right. Carry on." Then he closes the door and steps outside, leaving a fuming Ah Su behind. Li Yan leans against the door, looking inside the room. His expression a mix of emotions. He sighs. He can't stay here for long. He takes out his phone, opens his contacts, and finds Judy's number. But no matter how he thinks about it, he doesn't know what to say. After a moment of contemplation, he realizes it's too awkward to call. Li Yan racks his brains, but he has no choice. He dials the number. The other end picks up. He smiles slightly and asks in a gentle voice, "Hello. How are you doing?" Li Yan asks with a wry smile, "How's the prescription?" On the other end, Judy chuckles calmly and says, "I flushed it down the toilet." Li Yan sighs helplessly and says, "Well, at least you got your anger out." Judy asks, "Really? Is it okay that I flushed those strange pieces of paper down the toilet?" Li Yan's face immediately changes. His voice becomes tense and serious. "Where did you hear about that?" Judy yells angrily, "None of your business." Then hangs up. There's definitely danger on the horizon. And it's probably because of Judy. Li Yan stares at the words. Call ended on his phone screen. He feels incredibly frustrated. He frowns and clicks his tongue. If Judy suddenly knows about this, and he has 4 pieces, then it's not hard to guess where the remaining piece is. He hurriedly calls Judy back. But this time, he's met with an emotionless automated voice. The number you have dialed is currently unavailable. Please try again later. Li Yan is overwhelmed with anxiety. Why does trouble keep finding him? Without hesitation, he runs out. He has had all 4 pieces for 400 years. Could she possibly find them? Li Yan is certain that the last piece is with the third Hell's Talisman executor. At a bar in the entertainment district. Inside a VIP room. One of the gangsters from the Lianqing Shang gang is drinking with Judy. This time, Judy only brought Li as her bodyguard. Li seems completely unconcerned and relaxed. He leisurely munches on a pastry brought by a waiter, focusing entirely on his food. 2 other bodyguards stand guard silently behind him. Unusually, Judy has brought 2 more female bodyguards, who are also paying close attention to every move of the man sitting across from her. The man remains calm and collected. His eyes, behind his light-tinted glasses, curving into a sly smile. Judy sits on the sofa, her expression cold and aloof, like a woman of high status and wealth. Suddenly, the man's vision shifts. This man is a Hell's Talisman executor. So the threat posed by Judy's bodyguard is nothing in his eyes. Meanwhile, Li Yan is rushing, frantically trying to find Judy and that man. If he has 4 pieces, then the last piece must be with the Hell's Talisman executor who has yet to reveal himself. This man's name is Ao, a member of the Hualian Shang gang. Or rather, the most sought-after man in the Hualian Shang gang. Lately, all 3 of Judy's bodyguards are staring at Ao, on high alert. Judy frowns and asks, Hualian Shang can't even afford to feed you? The way he's eating is so unrefined and impolite. Completely ignores her. He scoops a piece of cake into his mouth, bites the fork, and says, cafeteria food can't compare to cake. As if to provoke Judy, he puts down his fork and sticks out his tongue, licking the frosting off his finger. He looks at Judy with a challenging gaze. Judy doesn't bother with him anymore and gets straight to the point. I can give you the money anytime. Where is what I need? Judy's female bodyguards haven't taken their eyes off Ao for a second. They are filled with hostility and don't even bother to hide their hatred. Ao licks his finger, not even looking at Judy, and asks, why don't we negotiate? The price first? Judy says a number. 100,000. Ao pouts and shakes his finger, showing his dissatisfaction. Judy doesn't even blink and continues. 200,000. Now, Ao hesitates. Judy smirks, judging by her expression. She's not interested in negotiating further. It seems like giving this man so much money isn't worth it. Judy stands up and says, Li, let's go. She scoffs and looks at Ao mockingly. You're very greedy. As a gangster, you'll surely go far. I have high hopes for you. Ao panics, wiping the frosting off his lips, and hurriedly says, wait, 200,000? Yes, 200,000. Judy doesn't want to waste any more time with this guy. She frowns and says, give me what I want, take the money, and disappear. Ao picks up his glass of liquor, takes a sip, and says with a smile, I can't carry something worth 200,000 on me. Come to my place and get it. Judy doesn't want to stay here any longer. She doesn't believe this guy can do anything to her. So she readily agrees. Li watches the man swaying and humming happily, a look of disdain on his face. In his line of work, he's seen plenty of people like Ao. Li walks up to Ao and wipes the frosting off his face with a handkerchief. His expression remains unchanged. He slightly opens his jacket, revealing the gun tucked into his waistband, and says, I'm warning you, don't try anything funny. Ao tilts his head, and nods repeatedly, chuckling, I understand, I understand. Meanwhile, on the main road of Longcheng Camp, an orange car speeds along. It seems the owner is in a hurry. Li Yan sits in the car, unable to focus on driving. That guy played cat and mouse with him for days, and operates in a place full of gangs. His disguised identity must be that of a gangster. When he fought Zhang Mingyuan in the arena, 3 pieces appeared simultaneously at the Funing building. Then the pieces changed hands. It wouldn't be difficult for that guy to figure out Li Yan's identity as a Hell's Talisman executor. Li Yan thought that guy would come to him sooner or later. But he never did. He vanished like a stone sinking into the ocean, leaving no trace. And now, Judy has sought him out. Li Yan is getting impatient. He takes out a cigarette and lights it. He takes a drag and exhales. Maybe that guy knows about his relationship with Judy, and deliberately let Judy find him. Li Yan steps on the gas, accelerating. The 1-month deadline is almost up. An opponent this patient is a tough nut to crack. With incredible speed and skillful driving, Li Yan arrives at Judy's house in no time. The imposing villa gate stands silently. Li Yan gets out of the car. Just then, his phone rings. He answers, his voice cold, hello, who is this? The person on the other end remains silent for a moment, as if trying to make Li Yan even more anxious. Just as Li Yan is about to speak again, the person on the other end bursts into laughter. A chilling and repulsive sound. Li Yan asks coldly, what do you want? It's not hard to guess that the caller is the third Hell's Talisman executor of this world. Ah Wu. Ah Wu sits on a windowsill, his hand holding a blood-stained cigarette. He says slowly with a grin, 20 minutes. Shang Building, 8 lanes. I'll be waiting for you. After finishing his sentence, the man hangs up. Li Yan quickly puts his phone away. He ignores the security guards who have spotted him and are running towards him. He immediately drives to the location Al Wu gave him. This district is the most famous entertainment area in Longcheng Camp. You can find anything here, from casinos to hotels to mahjong parlors to nightclubs. This place is practically a city that never sleeps. The atmosphere is bustling and lively. Li Yan asks a few people for directions. He walks through several alleyways, occasionally seeing groups of gangsters huddled together. He sees thin, haggard-looking people making calls, probably addicts. His anxiety intensifies. How could something happen to Judy here? Li Yan's expression changes. His eyes are filled with icy coldness. He carries a cloth-wrapped blade in his hand. As he approaches the location, the voice speaks. The location of the ancient novel collection piece has been detected. Proceed with caution. Li Yan looks up. It's coming from the building to his left. It's an old building. He smiles faintly and walks inside. Inside one of the rooms, Ah Wu is lighting another cigarette. The flickering flame illuminates his pale face. There are bullet holes on the wall and bodies on the floor. Judy's guards, all dead. He takes a long drag of his cigarette, exhales, and mutters. The Hell's Talisman event took place in the 1980s. Hong Kong's prosperity, although limited, is a good place to earn points. Judy is tied up on the other side, her body trembling uncontrollably. She looks completely different from her usual wealthy and elegant self. Although she's terrified, she tries to maintain her composure and looks at Ah Wu, saying, if you need money, we can negotiate. This place is crowded. You won't be able to get the money easily even if you kidnap me. I can cooperate and leave with you, but you have to take my people to the hospital. Ah Wu turns to look at Judy, throwing the empty cigarette pack on the ground. His. Except for the blood on his hands, which belongs to someone else. He's perfectly fine. Not a single scratch. Judy looks at Li, who is tied up beside her. His shirt is stained with blood. His body aches. She doesn't know how badly he's injured, so she's extremely worried. But Ah Wu has no shame. He sticks out his tongue and chuckles. Don't worry, this little one is so fierce. It's right up my alley. I wouldn't let her die before having my fun. He pulls out a pack of cigarettes, takes one out, and suddenly throws the pack at Judy. The pack hits the wall and falls to the ground, startling Judy. He walks toward Judy, bends down, and looks at her. He points his thumb down arrogantly and says, "Leave? Are you kidding me? This is my territory. I decide who stays, who goes, who lives, who dies." Li Yan might like Judy, but that doesn't mean Ah Wu has to. This woman is not his type. And she even dared to try and trick him. She truly doesn't know what's good for her. Ah Wu scoffs. He looks at Li, slumped over in the chair. The Hell's Event System interface appears. These are the requirements for his Hell's Event. First, become a member of any gang with the rank of Red Pole or higher. Second, force all executors in this Hell's Event to withdraw. The remaining goal, the final one, is to have the three-headed serpent devour at least 3 pieces of the ancient novel collection, including the 9-headed bird. Currently, goals 2 and 3 are incomplete. Goal 2 is the most important. Completing it will grant him the right to return. Note: you only have 10 hours left until your final return deadline. Judy grits her teeth, enduring the pain, and looks at Ah Wu, asking, "You're not an orphan. Why have you never been to the mainland? How do you know Li Yan?" Ah Wu bursts into laughter, looking at Judy. "If you know how to investigate me, why don't you investigate your boyfriend?" He's about to say something else. But just as Li Yan approaches, the system sends a notification. Ah Wu walks towards the window and looks down. Li Yan is entering the building. He's actually here? This is too good to be true. Ah Wu frowns, troubled. This is actually his 4th Hell's Event. Although he has undergone 3 settlements, his specialization isn't combat-oriented. Before a Hell's Talisman executor enters a world, they usually acquire some abilities that ordinary people can't compare to. This is called their specialization. Specialization is the foundation for a Hell's Talisman executor to survive at least 2 or 3 Hell's Events. It also influences their future development. Ah Wu's specialization is in reconnaissance, which is why he discovered Li Yan's identity earlier. But when it comes to combat, his direct combat ability is almost non-existent. Ah Wu flicks the cigarette butt out the window. Among his specializations, there's one called Creature Affinity, reaching up to 63%. Ah Wu is completely unaware of the impending disaster. He thinks arrogantly to himself, "So what if the executor has ancient martial arts skills? My ability is much rarer." His ability is the 3-headed serpent. Gluttony. Type: inheritance. Quality: rare. At the beginning of the Hell's Event, the 3-headed serpent is in a state of hunger. Once released, it can be fed with food in Hell's points to satisfy its hunger. The more satisfied it is, the stronger it becomes. However, once the 3-headed serpent is released, it can only operate within a radius of 200 meters. Going beyond this range will cause severe backlash. That's why Ah Wu had to lure them to his territory. Li Yan is definitely in for a fight to the death this time. He walks down the hallway, alert and cautious. This guy is a cunning planner. Bringing the Han sword would be useless. Judy brought armed guards. If that guy can counter firearms, he wouldn't have waited this long to make his move. He wouldn't have needed to take Judy hostage. Li Yan calmly analyzes the situation. If the opponent is a cunning strategist or possesses exceptional abilities, they wouldn't have waited until now to act. If he didn't have other matters to attend to, he would have ended this Hell's Event a long time ago. Li Yan throws his half-smoked cigarette to the ground. This passive approach, where all calculations rely solely on his reaction after hearing Judy's news. But Li Yan has a nagging doubt. If he doesn't care, wouldn't that mean the opponent's efforts have been in vain? Deep in Li Yan's mind, a thought flashes and disappears. Why not just set this place on fire and force everyone out? Even if innocent people get hurt, these people are just strangers to him? Even Judy. He's only known her for 20 days. Desperate times call for desperate measures. Besides, she might not even be in danger. The burning cigarette falls to the ground and bounces a few times. Red sparks dance in the air. Li Yan stubs out the cigarette and sighs, muttering. There are no difficulties before the strong. There are no obstacles before the weak. Although the thought is tempting, he dismisses it. There's something more important. Li Yan looks through a glass panel on the door and sees someone hiding nearby. The person is pressed against the wall, holding a gun. Warning. Li Yan suddenly swerves in the opposite direction, running into a nearby room. Ah fires a shot at him. The bullet grazes the floor, creating a shower of sparks. Ah might have powerful abilities and experience, but against someone with Li Yan's advanced martial arts specialization, he's still at a disadvantage. As he runs, Ah realizes that Li Yan has spotted him. He quickly hides behind the wall, his gun at the ready. He waits. Sure enough, another bullet comes flying towards him. The bullet misses him by mere centimeters. Instead of embedding itself in the wall beside him, it would have gone straight through his head. Li Yan, hiding in a nearby room, quickly peeks out, raises his gun, and aims at Oh. He fires a shot. The bullet casing falls to the ground. Oh is hit. But if it were that simple, we wouldn't be on the edge of our seats. To the naked eye, something that resembles the bullet cracks, or rather, is crushed into a round lump, and falls to the ground. The situation changes in an instant. Li Yan stares in astonishment at what just appeared. The voice says, "You have encountered the power of the three-headed serpent." A giant serpent slowly materializes in the air, coiling around Oh. It's not hard to guess that this is what blocked the bullets. One of its heads, shrouded in black energy, appears and disappears. The serpent is about 3 meters long, thicker than a human arm. Its body wraps around Oh, its shiny scales deflecting bullets. Sparks fly everywhere. Just as a bullet is about to hit Oh, the serpent opens its mouth and catches it, swallowing it like a peanut. Li Yan immediately activates Flash Step. Oh's information appears. Name: Li Jianghu. Inheritance: Enlightened Beast. Specializations: Creature Affinity, Gluttony. Current state: Gluttony. Skills: Flash Step, Yellowed Turban Curse. Enlightened Beast Inheritance: Unknown. Li Yan feels a jolt of electricity in his mind. The voice says, "You have encountered a predator." To explain a predator, it is an executor who has an irresolvable conflict with the executor who activated Flash Step. This conflict can only be resolved through withdrawal, or even death. If the prey kills the predator, they will gain all of the predator's shopping privileges and 30% of their settlement rewards in their respective Hell's events. The prey also has a chance of obtaining the predator's inheritance. If the predator kills the prey, there will be no reward, but they are guaranteed to obtain the prey's inheritance. Predator status can be obtained through certain special items. Li Yan makes a swift decision. He tucks the pistol back into his waistband and grabs the blade in his hand. If guns are ineffective, then you'll have to use his blade. He knows this time, it will be a real fight. He leaps, charging forward like a cannonball. He intends to launch a surprise attack. Oh is confident in his three-headed serpent. After all, he's been nurturing it for a month. It's much stronger than usual. He's full of confidence. As Li Yan charges, Oh pauses for a moment, then chuckles and says, "You're asking for death. You're dead." The three-headed serpent's head strikes like lightning, aiming to take a large bite out of Li Yan's neck. If he can't even dodge this, then all his martial arts training has been for nothing. As he charges toward the serpent's head, Li Yan suddenly relaxes his body, bending at the waist. With a powerful twist, he dodges the serpent's attack. Oh is completely surprised. He didn't expect Li Yan to escape the serpent's attack so easily. He frantically pulls out his gun and points it at Li Yan. As soon as he dodges the serpent's bite, Li Yan, without hesitation, throws the cleaver in his hand towards Li Jianghu. Li Jianghu panics, and a gunshot rings out. But it seems he's too hasty, and the bullet goes astray. grazing Li Yan's shoulder and ripping his shirt. At the same time, Li Jianghu's shoulder is also struck by Li Yan's cleaver. Li Jianghu clutches his wound and cries out in pain. He's not a martial artist, so his physical resilience isn't as good as Li Yan's. He can't endure pain like Li Yan, which is understandable. He grits his teeth, his eyes bulging. He trembles as he touches his shoulder wound, cursing silently. I didn't dare to let my guard down. This guy, it's fortunate that I was able to kill it. Maybe that thing is just difficult to deal with. Suddenly, the snake slammed its body against the wall and lunged forward. I almost forgot about this thing. Damn it. Li Yan frowned as he looked at the snake. Bashir suddenly lunged forward with incredible speed, giving Li Yan no chance to dodge. Li Yan, who was in midair, barely managed to dodge to the side, causing his body to lean backward. But he still couldn't avoid being injured. With a loud thud, Li Yan crashed into the wall. Blood spurted from his waist in agonizing pain. He grimaced, his eyes fixed coldly on Li Jianghu. His heart raced with urgency. Li Yan couldn't afford to hesitate any longer, because the longer Li Jianghu lived, the more relentless Bashir's attacks would become. He swept his leg, leapt into the air, and delivered a powerful kick to Li Jianghu's head. Just as the fight had begun, Li Jianghu had already sustained 2 painful blows, one to his shoulder and one to his head. Li Jianghu's body was sent flying several meters backward, crashing heavily against the wall. His head spun, and a scattering of debris rained down. As soon as Li Yan's feet touched the ground, he swiftly drew his Type 6 pistol, unleashing a barrage of bullets in Li Jianghu's direction. However, Bashir's speed was astonishing. It swiftly moved to Li Jianghu's side in an instant, coiling its body protectively around him. Li Yan was forced to grapple with Bashir once more, being pushed away from Li Jianghu. The ground was littered with debris from their fight, while Li Jianghu was currently injured. It didn't seem too serious. Li Yan saw Bashir charging towards him. He quickly raised his gun, aiming for Bashir's mouth, and fired. Bashir remained completely unharmed. Its massive head slammed directly into Li Yan. Li Yan hastily raised his arms to block the impact. The sheer force of the blow sent him staggering backward, and a sharp pain shot through his injured waist. Bashir exerted even greater force, pushing Li Yan into a nearby room. The door splintered and shattered upon impact. On the other side, Li Jianghu was still shielded within the protective coils of Bashir's tail, clutching his wounds and squinting, trying to make out what was happening. Through the thick dust cloud kicked up by their battle, he glared fiercely in the direction of the room where Li Yan had been shoved, and snarled, "You're dead." The glasses perched on his nose were gone, and his body was now battered and bruised. Fighting someone of a different caliber was definitely a different experience. Upstairs, Judy was crouched down near the floor. She swallowed nervously and said, "There's a noise downstairs." Behind Judy, Li's face had turned deathly pale. Dried blood clung to her lips. She sank her teeth into the rope that bound her, pulling with all her might. The rope snapped, but the force she had used sent a jolt of pain through her teeth, and her head throbbed. Li's face was contorted in pain, her hair a tangled mess. Li urged, "Never mind, just jump out the window and run." Judy gritted her teeth and said, "Li Yan must be here." She then helped Li cut the ropes binding her hands with a knife. Because she had bitten down so hard earlier, blood was now trickling from her mouth. Li winced, spitting out a mixture of blood and saliva. "It's useless even if he comes. That snake, it just won't die. I've lived for 28 years. And I've only ever seen snakes like that in novels. This world has gone mad. Such an outlandish creature actually exists, slithering around. Li Jianghu, impervious to blades and bullets. That bastard was trouble from the start." Judy, who had been cheerfully chatting just moments ago, was now terrified by the sudden attack. And that fearsome snake had reduced Judy, who had lived a life of luxury, to a state of sheer terror. It was only now, as she calmed down slightly, that she realized that man seemed somewhat wary of Li Yan. Li didn't overthink it. She looked at Judy, who was still hesitant to leave, and shouted urgently, Judy, jump out the window and find someone to call the police. As Judy picked up the gun from the floor, Lee thought she was planning to fight that guy. She shouted sharply. Don't be stupid. Now calm down. Judy naturally understood her current situation. She wouldn't do anything foolish like getting in the way. Li Yan simply unloaded the bullets from the gun. Lee was seriously injured now, so she couldn't move. Judy threw the empty gun to the ground and said, bullets are useless against that snake. But it can hurt you. Upon hearing this, Lee's eyes welled up with emotion. After removing all the bullets from the gun, Judy made her way to the window. One hand gripping the windowsill, she bent down and removed her high heels. Judy's eyes were slightly red. She looked at Lee, gritted her teeth, and said, take care. Judy leaned halfway out of the window. Her gaze lingered on Lee with a mixture of emotions. She was clearly worried about leaving her friend behind. But Judy understood better than anyone that if she didn't leave now, neither of them would have a chance of escape. There would be no turning back. Watching Judy jump out of the window, Lee felt a sense of relief wash over her. She tried to regulate her breathing. A faint smile touched her lips, and she closed her eyes slowly, resting. Back to the scene of Li Yan's fierce battle. The glass shards inside the room were all shattered. Li Jianghu gritted his teeth, enduring the pain, clutching his wounds. With Biesher's protection, he slowly approached Li Yan. A water pipe behind Li Yan was damaged. Water sprayed from the broken pipe, drenching the room. Drops of blood mixed with the water, falling to the ground and landing on Biesher's body. Li Yan surveyed the room. There were no large objects he could use. Suddenly, Biesher let out a hiss and lunged, aiming for Li Yan's shoulder with its fangs bared. Li Yan quickly dodged. He leaned back, using one leg as a pivot, and whipped his other leg up, delivering a powerful kick to Biesher's body. Fresh blood oozed from the wound on his waist. If an ordinary person had taken that kick from Li Yan, they would have been sent flying several meters, or knocked unconscious. But Biesher seemed completely unaffected. On the contrary, Li Yan felt a sharp pain shoot up his leg. This creature's scales were incredibly tough. Kicking it felt like kicking a block of cement. Seeing that there was no way to harm it directly, Li Yan reacted swiftly, using his foot, which was still planted on Biesher's body. As a springboard, he launched himself into the air. Through their brief exchange, Li Yan seemed to have realized that this creature's fangs possessed a hidden power. Anything they came into contact with would be instantly devoured. Seeing Li Yan leap, the monstrous serpent swiftly turned its head and snapped at him. But Li Yan had already jumped higher, evading the serpent's lightning-fast attack. Li Jianghu, standing within the serpent's protective coils, panicked slightly. This Li Yan was proving to be a formidable opponent. After suffering 2 blows from Li Yan, Li Jianghu ordered the snake always by his side for protection. And that was precisely why Li Yan had more room and opportunities to dodge. This thing was incredibly fast in a straight line, but not at all agile when turning corners. Moreover, the farther it was from its master, the slower it became. A sharp pain shot through the wound on his waist. His heart pounded in his chest. Despite all this thing was still incredibly difficult to deal with. Just now, he had nearly lost his calf to that snake's bite. He leaned to the side, continuing to evade Biesher's relentless attacks. He fought while observing and analyzing his opponent. If Li Jianghu was to blame this time, it was his own fault. He had underestimated Li Yan's ancient martial arts skills and that other ability. Li Yan suddenly thought of Zhang Mingyuan, the man whose eyes held the image of the Enlightenment Beast. That Enlightenment Beast eye was just the eye of the Enlightenment Beast, not the Enlightenment Beast itself. So the most noteworthy thing here were Biesher's 4 fangs. Only its fangs were formidable. It didn't possess any other serpentine abilities. Thinking this way, it could only mean one thing. How can one catch tiger cubs without entering the tiger's den? Li Yan, ignoring Biesher's protective presence around Li Jianghu, charged towards him. He focused all his attention on Biesher's movements. His agile form weaved and dodged, slipping past its defenses. Sweat dripped from his brow as he exerted himself. He leapt, using Bieshir's body as leverage to propel himself forward. Soaring through the air. Li Jiangwu's heart skipped a beat. Li Yan was closing in fast. But he had no intention of letting Bieshir leave his side. To protect him, Li Yan steeled himself. His awareness and vigilance heightened tenfold. His eyes were fixed on Li Jiangwu, who was still shielded by Bieshir. He bent his knees and twisted his waist. The top of his foot was taut like a drawn bowstring. His body was like a sword as he struck out at Li Jiangwu. It was a blur of motion. Li Yan's speed was astonishing. All he could see was a fleeting shadow. But in the next instant, a whooshing sound seemed to reach Li Jiangwu's ears. He turned abruptly, startled, his heart pounding in his chest. Bieshir opened its jaws wide, lunging at the arm that was striking towards Li Jiangwu. Attempting to intercept it, this was the moment Li Yan had been waiting for. Finally, an opening. Let's see if I can't take your hand. Li Yan didn't flinch. With a swift movement of his arm, he channeled his energy, transforming his punch into a palm strike. His arm swung upward. The serpent's head slammed into his hand, its fangs sinking into his flesh. For sharp fangs pierced his skin. A searing pain shot through him. Blood splattered as the fangs dug deeper into his flesh. Li Yan grabbed Bieshir's head with his other hand, using it as leverage to launch himself into the air. His waist twisted. Li Jiangwu stared at him. His heart raced. As if on cue, Li Yan, who had seemed harmless just a moment ago, twisted his lower body, his hand still gripping Bieshir's head. He used the serpent's momentum to swing his leg high, delivering a powerful kick to Li Jiangwu's head. Li Jiangwu reeled from the impact, his head spinning. Darkness clouded his vision. A pungent, metallic taste filled his mouth and nostrils. Li Jiangwu's body was sent flying, spinning wildly through the air. He crashed into several nearby walls, sending chunks of plaster raining down. In this situation, Bieshir was completely unable to protect its master. Seeing its master in danger, Bieshir quickly released Li Yan and rushed to Li Jiangwu's aid. Li Yan stumbled, nearly losing his balance. He doubled over slightly, the wound on his waist throbbing in pain. Suddenly, a blinding golden light emanated from where Li Jiangwu lay. It was almost impossible to look at directly. Li Yan stared in astonishment. This must be it. Li Jiangwu's trump card. His last resort. It was also the third skill Li Yan had seen. When he used the Crimson One strike, Li Jiangwu seemed to be dead. His head lolled back. His body levitated, bathed in golden light. In the blinding light, the figure of an old man appeared behind him. Li Yan also activated his Crimson One strike. This was the Yellow Turban Oath, activated when one suffered a fatal blow. It could keep the wound from becoming instantly fatal, and slowly heal up to 30% of the injury. Li Jiangwu coughed, spitting out blood as he slowly regained consciousness. He stumbled, clutching his arm, and collapsed to the ground, coughing up mouthfuls of black blood. He staggered towards a nearby open door. His intention to flee was clear. Li Yan wouldn't let him escape so easily. He shouted, "Stop!" Li Jiangwu didn't dare to delay. He fled as fast as he could. His steps were unsteady, and he moaned in pain with each step. Li Yan gritted his teeth, panting heavily. He looked at the wound on his hand. His ring finger and little finger were gone. The wound spasmed, sending waves of pain through him. Blood spurted out. Deep in his palm was a large bite mark. Li Yan gritted his teeth and tore a strip of fabric from his shirt. Using his teeth, he carefully bandaged the wound. Then, he quickly took out the blood cell booster S. Li Yan snorted coldly and staggered out of the room. He suddenly grinned, a maniacal laughter escaping his lips. It was a chilling sound, filled with 10 parts madness, echoing through the apartment building. Ha 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 ha, he walked out the door, laughing hysterically, like a madman on a murderous rampage. Li Jiangwu was terrified by Li Yan's laughter. His face contorted in fear, both from terror and from Li Yan's punches. He ran for his life. This guy was definitely not someone he could afford to provoke. Li Jiangwu was finally realizing the gravity of his situation. He stumbled as he ran. His right arm was practically useless, hanging limply at his side. Blood dripped onto the ground, leaving a trail as he fled. He ran, screaming in terror. Madman, monster. How can such a person exist? A sharp pain pierced his chest. Li Jianghu doubled over, coughing up blood. The cleaver was still embedded in his shoulder. He couldn't understand. Crimson One strike had shown that Li Yan was a novice, with no inheritance or special abilities. Li Jianghu dragged himself up the stairs. His vision was blurring, as if something was playing tricks on him. His focus shifted in and out. He shook his head, trying to regain his composure. That bitch, he cares about her so much. The bodyguard's gun is still there. I still have a chance. But as soon as he stepped back into the room, Li Jianghu wanted to scream in frustration. Except for Lei, who was clutching her wounds and lying there. No matter how hard he looked, he couldn't find Judy anywhere. Blood dripped from his wounds. Li Jianghu stumbled into the room. The rope that had bound Judy lay discarded on the floor. Lei, who was still in the room, sensed someone entering. She opened her eyes to see. As soon as she confirmed that it was Li Jianghu, Lei's eyes were filled with hatred. She glared at the despicable man, wishing she could kill him right there. Li Jianghu was furious. He stormed over, grabbed Lei by the collar, and shouted, "Where is she? Where is your master?" Lei gritted her teeth and glared at Li Jianghu. She rasped weakly, "FCKU." Li Jianghu was driven to madness by desperation. Damn it. I'm truly cornered now. He gritted his teeth, sweat dripping down his face. He cursed in frustration and kicked Lei's wound. Lei cried out in pain. A wave of agony surged through her. She coughed up blood. Li Jianghu reached out and grabbed Lei's gun. As Judy had said, the gun was empty. He was too enraged to notice that the gun felt much lighter. Li Jianghu dragged Lei by the collar, pulling her roughly behind him. He shouted, "Stop pretending to be dead, get up." Well, Li Yan. It didn't take you long to find us. He chuckled and said to the person in the room, "Where are you running off to in such a hurry?" Li Jianghu's face paled. Damn it, I'm cursed for 10 lifetimes. Li Yan stepped forward and placed his hand on the wooden door. His body slowly appeared from behind the door. Aren't you going to play with me a little longer? He then walked in, raised his gun, and pointed it at Li Jianghu. Li Jianghu did the same, raising his own empty gun. He said, trembling, "Aren't you afraid of? This can't be your first Yanluo event." A name popped into Li Jianghu's head. He glared at Li Yan, demanding, "You're a remnant." Li Yan didn't answer. He smiled at Li Jianghu and asked calmly, 1.923, that gun, your left hand can't hold it steady, can it? Li Jianghu retorted, "Try me." Li Yan suddenly became benevolent. He smiled at Li Jianghu. "Let the girl go, let's have a fair fight. How about we both drop our guns?" Li Jianghu's temples throbbed. His body began to transform. The shadowy form of a python's head materialized behind him. He hesitated. If Li Jianghu had Biasher right now, then surely Li Yan wouldn't stand a chance. Suddenly, Lei, who was being held by the collar, cried out in pain. Shoot, his gun is empty. Brilliant. Li Jianghu hadn't anticipated this move at all. As soon as Lei spoke, Li Jianghu reacted instantly. He threw the gun at Li Yan. Biasher flinched, lunging forward to catch the gun in its jaws. Li Jianghu roared in anger. Damn you, you tricked me. You don't have any bullets either. Why are you talking so much? Li Yan seized the opportunity. While Biasher was trying to digest the gun, he unleashed a powerful punch at Li Jianghu. It was a blow filled with all his rage. Li Jianghu saw nothing but a flash of red, and then stars. His body was sent flying several meters. Blood poured from Li Jianghu's 7 orifices. This was it, his death in the end. He wasn't the main character. A voice echoed in Li Jianghu's mind. You have chosen to detonate Biasher. This inheritance ability will be frozen. 4-1 Yanluo event. Your inheritance transfer strength is reduced by 10%. Inheritance detonation. You have chosen to detonate your inheritance, paying a hefty price for one fatal blow. Biasher, which was unharmed just a moment ago, suddenly exploded into pieces. From inside the mouth of the BA snake, a stream of black energy shot out like a sword blade. Li Jianghu and the BA snake used all their might to charge towards Li DM. The situation was extremely critical. At that moment, that voice appeared in Li DM's head again, to remind him of his opponent's weakness. His next attack would include all actions that could injure his opponent, such as shooting guns, using poisoned weapons, increasing his speed by 100%, and increasing the damage he inflicted by 100%. Li DM reached out and grabbed the blade that was stuck in Li Jiangwu's shoulder. Li Jiangwu looked at him doubtfully. It seemed like he had never thought that this guy would counterattack at that moment. And counterattack he did. If he killed this Li Jiangwu, would that stop the BA snake from exploding? He'd have to kill him to find out. Li DM tightened his grip on the blade in his hand, driving it deeper into Li Jiangwu's body. He sliced down to the bone. Li Jiangwu let out a scream of pain. Fresh red blood poured out. And in an instant, it dyed a small area of the BA snake red. Li Jiangwu continued to gather energy. Li DM's heart beat faster and faster. He gritted his teeth and pressed the blade in his hand down even further. Then he pulled it down, carving a long line into Li Jiangwu's body. The BA snake shot a black beam towards Li DM. But Li DM also pulled back the blade that was embedded in Li Jiangwu's body. He carved a circular cut. Blood splattered everywhere. Li Jiangwu definitely had no chance of survival. A black light shot toward Li DM's head. But fortunately, it dissipated just in time. A moment later and Li DM would have been dead. He dropped the blade from his hand. Li Jiangwu's blood dripped from the blade onto the floor. Before the BA snake could self-destruct, it slowly vanished into thin air. Li Jiangwu's body collapsed to the ground. A long gash ran across his chest. Li lay sprawled on the ground, trembling as she crawled toward Li DM. Witnessing this battle with her own eyes, Li found it more and more unbelievable the more she thought about it. Li DM turned to look at her in confusion and asked her what she was doing. Li struggled to crawl closer, blood from her wounds trailing across the floor. She stopped in front of Li DM and paused to catch her breath. Gathering her strength, she gritted her teeth and clutched at Li DM's pants leg. She called out to him. Li DM turned his head and gave Li a cold look, as if he wanted to say something, but ultimately stopped himself. "I'll take you to the hospital. Where do you want to go?" Li was speechless. After resting for a while and recovering a little, Li DM got to his feet. He helped Li up by supporting her uninjured arm. He helped her to stand. The room was now filled with blood and corpses. At that moment, outside the window, the sirens of police cars wailed. The police were always great at showing up right when everything was over. Du got out of a police car and spoke seriously with several police officers. He then looked anxiously at the room above, where Li was trapped, his heart filled with worry and anxiety. And Li DM carried Li to the window and looked down. Seeing that he was safe and sound, that his handsome face was still intact, Judy smiled with relief. Leaning against the police car, she nodded slightly to Li DM. She breathed a sigh of relief, only now able to completely relax. She never wanted to experience a situation like today's ever again. "Officer." The police officers quickly entered the building as ordered and secured the area. Judy leaned against the police car, deeply moved. She was still trying to control her emotions. Li DM carefully helped Li out. In the room, only Lich Jiangvu lay dead. The two of them left the room. That voice slowly rang out. "You have killed a predator. You have obtained all purchasing rights and 30% of your opponent's settlement reward in this underworld event. Since you do not possess any inheritance, unfortunately you do not have the right to claim the boss snake." On a large river flowing by the Nine Dragons encampment, a large boat slowly drifted downstream. The place looked more like a traditional restaurant than a yacht. On the boat, Li DM continued to slurp down his noodles with gusto. He set his empty bowl on the table and then exhaled and patted his stomach. Judy, who was sitting opposite Li DM, rested her hands gently on her thighs, smiled at him, and asked, "Are you full? We'll talk when you're done eating." Lee DM held up a finger and said with a smile, "I think I can eat another bowl." That was not too difficult a request for Judy. She snapped her fingers at the waiter and said, "Another bowl of wonton noodles." Lee DM laughed. "How can I possibly eat that much?" Judy didn't seem to care. Her attitude was completely different from when Lee DM had invited her to eat noodles. "We have plenty of time. I'm paying for the whole boat anyway." If only he could say those words like Judy could. Time passed slowly. Lee DM quickly finished eating. Judy's expression turned serious. "Why did you break up with me?" she asked. Lee DM was completely nonchalant. He said with a casual smile, "Why not ask about the magic conch shell?" This man was truly ungrateful. Judy suppressed her rising anger and asked, "Was it because of Tai Sui?" Lee DM spat out the mouthful of beer he had just taken. He sputtered, wiping his mouth as he looked at Judy. "Who?" Judy said angrily, "Don't play dumb." At that moment, the waiter arrived with another bowl of wonton noodles. He temporarily sealed off his senses. Lee DM sighed and said, "A sharp sword. Needs a suitable scabbard to rest in. Not another sword that is even sharper than it is." Judy was even more confused. She pressed him further. "So why?" Lee DM picked up the bowl of wonton noodles. Instead of answering, he focused on his noodles, slurping them down with gusto. "The wonton noodles here are really delicious. Get the chef out here later. I'll ask him for the recipe. I can make them myself after I leave Hong Kong." Li Yan wears an expression of extreme satisfaction. He rubs his belly. Flowers seem to bloom around him. Judy asks curiously, "Where are you going?" Li Yan doesn't answer. He takes out a cigarette and lights it with a match. Judy is annoyed. She asks angrily, "I'm asking you where you're going." Li Yan exhales a cloud of smoke. His expression turns serious. "It's not about where I am going. It's about the fact that I am definitely leaving. Speaking of breaking up, I was thinking earlier, was I out of my mind? You're beautiful, hot, and loaded. I could have slept with you, taking your money, and walked away. Who would have found me?" Li Yan seems to be talking to himself. He looks at the woman sitting opposite him intently, as if he's trying to convince himself. He doesn't know when he started telling himself, "She's a good woman. Don't ruin her life. Honestly, I thought you were just playing around." Li Yan can't be blamed for thinking that. From Judy's perspective, it wouldn't be strange to play around like that. Judy tucks her hair behind her ear. Revealing her ear, she chuckles softly. Raising an eyebrow, she says playfully, "Who's playing around with you?" It seems the misunderstanding is cleared up. Judy, seeing Li Yan finished his wonton noodles, stands up and turns to leave. She says, "Let's go. You still want to eat?" Li Yan gets up and walks out to the deck of the boat. They both lean against the railing, looking at the night view of Longchang. The cool night breeze blows on their faces. They stand in silence for a long time. The atmosphere is romantic enough for a movie. Judy suddenly breaks the silence and asks, "Is that all you wanted to say?" Of course not. Li Yan now only has Judy to rely on. He looks at Judy and asks, "Please, for the sake of me rushing to save you, do me a favor. I have a neighbor." Before Li Yan can finish speaking, he feels a sensation on the tip of his nose. It's Judy's hair brushing against him. He looks up, and to his surprise, Judy suddenly kisses him. He feels her warm, soft lips on his. The feeling is intoxicating. Li Yan turns around and wraps his arms around Judy's waist. He hears Judy's laughter ringing in his ears, even though the sky is vast and the boat is full of beautiful dreams. The next morning at the Funing building is just another ordinary day off for Li Yan. After spending a passionate night with Judy, he went grocery shopping and spent some time cooking. Ah Su, hearing the commotion, wakes up and comes out to see what's happening. Li Yan, spatula in hand, wearing an apron, presents a plate of char siu to Ah Su. He forces a smile and says, "Try the char siu I made. I even cooked it myself. You had to give me some face." Ah Su stares at Li Yan for a moment and asks, "Where did you go last night?" Li Yan tosses the spatula into the sink, hangs up his apron, and says with a smile, I had some personal business to take care of. Oh, by the way, I've completed your school enrollment. Later, I'll introduce you to someone. She's a distant relative of yours. It took me a lot of effort to find her. She's agreed to be your guardian. Legally and emotionally. She's a better fit than me. Su pouts and mumbles sadly. My family fled here. How could I have relatives in Hong Kong? Li Yan turns to look at her. Kneels down and gently pats her head. He says softly, before she passed away, your mother told me, and I'm sure she wasn't wrong. Su puffs out her cheeks and says, don't think you can fool me just because I'm young. Li Yan smiles. Your mother wanted you to have a good life. At that moment, the doorbell rings, attracting their attention. As Li Yan goes to open the door, Judy rushes in. Today, she's wearing a casual outfit. Nothing fancy. She's not wearing any makeup. She looks distraught, tears streaming down her face, as she runs towards Su. She cries, I can't believe you were in Hong Kong all this time. I never got to see you before she passed away. But I promise I'll take good care of her daughter. For some reason, Judy's eyes are red and swollen. It seems like she's been crying a lot. She rushes towards Su and kneels down in front of her. She reaches out with a trembling hand, touches Su's face, and asks, Su, right? You can call me Judy. Su looks up at Li Yan, then at Judy. After a moment of hesitation, she's moved by Judy's heartfelt display of grief. She whispers, Sister. Sister Judy. Judy hugs Su tightly and cries on her shoulder. Su gives Li Yan an okay sign. Su joins Judy in crying heartbrokenly. So this is peak acting. Li Yan scratches his forehead in defeat. It turns out women are natural-born actresses. Su didn't believe anything he said. But Judy, with her crying act, managed to win Su over, making her cry along with her. Scary. After their vigorous activity, Judy rests her head on Li Yan's arm, holding a cigarette. A look of contentment on her face. She smiles and says, that little girl is quite interesting. Li Yan holds the beauty in his arms. He looks at her gently and says, I asked you to take Su in as your cousin because I hope she won't be gossiped about for being an orphan. I don't want her to feel unloved. But you don't have to spoil her. Just make sure she gets a proper education. Judy doesn't respond, just smiles. She looks curiously at Li Yan's hand, missing several fingers, and asks, even with your right hand injured, you still managed to defeat that Wing Chun kid? In Judy's eyes, Li Yan, who could defeat that terrifying creature, is truly remarkable. She doesn't even consider that kid a threat. That kid isn't worth her attention. Li Yan tilts his head, contemplating his hand, missing 2 fingers. Li Jianghu's hell's talisman inheritance is truly terrifying. The 3-headed serpent is fierce. But luckily, Li Jianghu himself isn't physically strong. At times, he seemed to be panicking as the host, like a commander losing control. This, combined with the serpent's natural predatory instincts, and the human body's weakness meant that, in a life or death battle, there would be many unpredictable outcomes. Li Yan thinks if Tian Tizi fought Li Jianghu, then Li Jianghu would likely win. But from a different perspective, Zhang Mingyuan might not be weaker than Li Jianghu. The enlightened beast's power can burn souls. Which means that Zhang Mingyuan's punches and kicks could potentially harm the 3-headed serpent. But in the end, this isn't a game where you just have to clear levels. The next opponent is bound to be stronger than the previous one. Anyone can win. What matters is mindset, determination, and even luck. When this Hell's event ends, Li Yan is somewhat excited. He should be able to get his own inheritance, just like Zhang Mingyuan and Li Jianghu. According to Zhang Mingyuan, inheritance is one of the most valuable things in the entire Hell's world. Only by completing the first Hell's event is an inheritance guaranteed. Afterward, obtaining a second inheritance, or even more, becomes increasingly difficult. He stops thinking about Li Jianghu For now. He looks at Judy and asks with a smile. Do you want me to win? She looks at him and answers without hesitation. Of course. Li Yan reaches for the cigarette in her hand. Takes a long drag. And chuckles. Well, in that case, I'll definitely win. July 6th, Bing Yin Year. An auspicious day for worshipping deities and making marriage proposals. Li Yan is at the Funing building. Reviewing footage of Tian Tizi's fights. The footage Li Yan is watching shows Tian Tizi using double broadswords to fight against Zhou Wei Duo. There's a half-empty pack of cigarettes on the table. Red Ghost leans against the large desk in the room, waiting for Li Yan to finish watching the footage before speaking. Li Yan almost finishes watching the tape. Red Ghost slowly asks. Tian Tizi is using the 8/broadsword technique, directly inherited from IP Man. Are you sure you can win? Li Yan doesn't answer. Uncle Yu, standing beside them, also remains silent. Red Ghost asks again, still using the sword? Of course, if it were before, the sword would be the best option. But now. Li Yan shakes his head and says calmly, my right hand is injured. The Han sword is powerful, but it takes a lot of strength. I want to change. Red Ghost takes out a cigarette, lights it, takes a long drag, and asks, change to what? When it comes to traditional martial arts, Li Yan is quite confident in his abilities. He explains seriously. The 8 Trigram School has a superior weapon. The Ziwu Mandarin Duck Axes. The Ziwu Mandarin Duck Axes are exotic weapons passed down by the founder of the 8 Trigram School, Don Haichuan. They consist of 2 crescent-shaped blades, one large and one small, hooked together. They resemble a distorted number 10, with a gap in the middle for the user to grip. They are a type of short, double-handed axes, even rarer than the butterfly swords that TNTZ uses. Uncle Yu, who is drinking, stops and turns to Li Yan, asking, you're going to wield one with your left hand? Li Yan replies succinctly, it's enough. Uncle Yu wipes a few drops of liquor from her lips and shakes her head, murmuring, arrogant. After hearing Li Yan's description, Red Ghost leaves to prepare the weapons. They have faith in Li Yan. If he says he can use them, then he can use them. The door closes, leaving only 2 people in the room. As soon as Red Ghost leaves, Uncle Yu and Li Yan make eye contact. Neither of them speaks. They both look away, avoiding each other's gaze. The atmosphere is peaceful but also strange. In the private training room, all that can be heard are the sounds of intense training. Li Yan wields the Ziwu Mandarin Duck Axes with his left hand, the circular blade striking the wooden dummy. The weapons embed themselves in the wood. Li Yan rolls his shoulders, loosening his muscles. Red Ghost, leaning against a nearby wall, remarks. The Mandarin Duck Axes are double-handed weapons. You're only using your non-dominant left hand. Your chances of winning are very low. Li Yan takes out a roll of white bandage and uses his teeth to secure it tightly. He turns to Red Ghost and says with a smile, Brother Red Ghost, I've been in Longqing for so long, but we've never sparred. Why don't we have a little friendly match? Red Ghost doesn't immediately accept or decline. He asks seriously, Yan, how has the Funing building treated you? How have I treated you? Li Yan answers without hesitation, very well. Red Ghost nods, massaging his temples, and takes out another cigarette. He exhales a puff of smoke and says, I grew up relying on the kindness of my neighbors. I never trained in martial arts or fought much. I just learned to fight naturally. I won't betray those who have been good to me. Tai Sui took me in when I was starving to death. I would give my life for her. So tell me, if someone has done you a favor, how should you treat them? Red Ghost's tone becomes colder. Li Yan looks at him and says, Brother Red Ghost, just say what you want to say. Red Ghost puts down his cigarette, stares at Li Yan, and asks, Tai Sui asked me to ask you, are you planning to disappear without saying anything? Li Yan, on the other hand, is completely calm. He looks at Red Ghost and says with a smile, if Tai Sui already knows, then let her decide whether to punish me after I finish tomorrow's fight. Red Ghost sighs in frustration and gives a thumbs down. He grumbles, Judy is protecting you now. How could I dare touch you? Li Yan smiles helplessly, looking at the frowning red ghost. He thinks, it's true, ever since I came here. This guy has taken good care of me. Maybe I should cooperate with him a little. As a thank you. With that in mind, Li Yan gives a nonchalant smile. And says, what else, brother red ghost? Think about it. Tai Sui has a fiery temper, but she hasn't touched me. You should know your limits. Red ghost is taken aback. He gives Li Yan a skeptical look, but seems to understand in an instant. He lets out a helpless chuckle. Li Yan is a bit embarrassed. By Red Ghost's expression, this guy suddenly steps back, making him feel uneasy. Red Ghost takes 2 steps forward and throws his cigarette butt at Li Yan. It seems he succeeded. Li Yan swings his hand, punching the flying cigarette butt. He doesn't seem to be thinking straight. Red Ghost immediately charges forward, his first punch, with his left foot forward. A right hook aimed at Li Yan's face. His second strike is a powerful knee to the stomach. As Li Yan bends over, Red Ghost punches him in the back. Li Yan could easily dodge these punches if he wanted to. He willingly takes the first punch. He even takes the knee to the stomach. But he's not going to let Red Ghost keep hitting him in the back. He's not going to put up with it any longer. Li Yan can't hold back anymore. He pushes Red Ghost away. Red Ghost immediately takes a few steps back. Li Yan looks at him and says, cut it out. That's enough. Hit me again, and I'll fight back. Red Ghost isn't scared. He knows he's losing. But he wants to keep sparring. Who cares if they get a little rough? He gestures to Li Yan, beckoning him with a grin. Come on, you can do better than that. Since that's the case, Li Yan charges forward. At the same time, Red Ghost also lunges at him. Fist against fist. The frustration and tension between the two brothers are finally released. Suddenly, the training room door opens. It seems Uncle Yu heard the commotion made by the two close brothers and came in. Li Yan and Red Ghost, who are about to attack each other again, look up in surprise. Uncle Yu walks in and says sternly, stop it. The two brats actually stop. Li Yan looks at Red Ghost and laughs heartily. He has a bruise on his face from Red Ghost's punch earlier. Red Ghost also looks battered, with several bruises on his face. His mouth is bleeding. Seeing Li Yan laughing, Red Ghost yells angrily, what are you laughing at? Uncle Yu walks over and stands between them. She looks at Red Ghost sternly and says, that's enough. Whatever it is, wait until Li Yan finishes his fight tomorrow. She turns to Li Yan. He tilts his head and smiles at Uncle Yu. Unexpectedly, Uncle Yu doesn't lecture him like Red Ghost did. She simply says, good luck, then turns and leaves. Her words carry a double meaning. July 7th, Bing Yan Year. Everything is auspicious. Li Yan sits in the waiting room, wiping the blades of the Ziwu Mandarin duck axes, while checking his current status. Right hand, severely injured. Ancient martial arts specialization, 82%. His face is expressionless. He is focused on cleaning his weapons. He holds a vial of blood cell booster in his hand. There's only 1 minute left. For a month, he's been constantly fighting, risking his life. He's used to it now. Today, to increase his chances of winning, Li Yan is even using blood cell booster S. His right hand is crippled, and he has a disease. Still wanting to win this fight is pure arrogance. Li Yan puts the vial on the chair and walks out, axes in hand. Blood cell booster S specialization increased by 1%. As he steps out the door, a slender figure wearing sunglasses asks, are you leaving after this fight? Li Yan looks at her in surprise. How did you know? Judy takes off her sunglasses and explains calmly, I checked your bank account. You withdrew all the money. I can't believe. You made over 5 million from fighting. Li Yan scratches his nose and smiles at Judy. Judy is not a stranger to him. He doesn't feel the need to hide anything from her. So he decides to leave without any further explanation. He reaches into his inner pocket, takes out an exquisite square box, and hands it to Judy. He bought this gift for her. Even if Judy hadn't come here to see him, he would have given it to her. Judy takes the gift box happily and opens it. This is the first time Li Yan has ever given her a gift. At least he's thoughtful even though he's leaving. Inside the box is a jade cigarette holder. It's for smoking. It's inlaid with a red pearl and engraved with patterns. Looking very delicate. Judy touches the jade cigarette holder and asks, "Is this a family heirloom?" Li Yan came here from another world. How could he have a family heirloom? He scratches his cheek and says with an embarrassed smile, "I bought it in Wanchai yesterday. Using this when you smoke will prevent your fingers from turning yellow. Plus, you look stunning with it, like a movie star." Judy lowers her head, looking down at the gift box in her arms, and asks sadly, "When will you be back?" Li Yan is silent for a moment. To be honest, he doesn't know if he can come back. But if he has the chance. Li Yan smiles and says sincerely, "If I have the chance, I'll definitely come back." He turns and leaves. It was just a brief encounter. Judy has fallen for Li Yan. He's speechless. Suddenly, she runs towards him and hugs him tightly from behind. Feeling his warmth one last time, she whispers, "I left a gift in your room. Don't forget to take it." Perhaps because she doesn't want Li Yan to see your expression. She stays behind him. Li Yan nods. He doesn't turn to look at Judy and continues walking towards the arena. Judy stays behind. She walks slowly down the hallway, taking out a file from her handbag. This file was originally meant to end up in the trash. But now, on the file is a picture of Li Yan. But he looks younger. At the arena, the fight hasn't begun yet. The crowd is packed, eager to watch the fight. They chant excitedly, "King of Hell! King of Hell!" Uncle Yu and Red Ghost are in the crowd. Uncle Yu is drinking as usual. Red Ghost looks a little helpless. Li Yan slowly walks out. He hears the deafening roar of the crowd. The moment they see Li Yan, they shout even louder. King of Hell is invincible in their eyes. In their eyes. No one else is worth cheering for. Tian Tizi holds his double broadswords. Li Yan steps into the ring and turns to face him. Seeing the Ziwu Mandarin duck axes in Li Yan's hand, Tian Tizi smirks. In the distance, high up in the stands, an old man, whom Uncle Yu recognizes immediately, is also sitting there, leaning on his cane, watching the fight. It's old Master Sui. When he sees Li Yan, his expression changes slightly. He falls into deep thought. Tian Tizi, still with his usual arrogant demeanor, looks at Li Yan approaching and asks, "The weirder the weapon, the quicker the death. Ever heard that saying?" Li Yan doesn't respond. As if he's daydreaming, he's still thinking about that beautiful woman. Tian Tizi calls out impatiently, "Hey! Do you hear me?" Li Yan cuts him off coldly. "Li Yan." Tian Tizi falls silent and smiles at the man in front of him. His eyes are filled with murderous intent. He grins, his eyes burning with arrogance, in stark contrast to Li Yan's calm demeanor. Then, he announces, "Wing Chun, Tian Tizi." After the two opponents greet each other, Tian Tizi charges forward, his butterfly swords gripped tightly in his hands. Li Yan stands in a neutral stance, watching as Tian Tizi approaches, without moving an inch. Tian Tizi speeds up, his leisurely stroll turning into a charge. He closes the distance between them in an instant. He's only a short distance from Li Yan. He bends his knees slightly and leaps towards Li Yan, thrusting his butterfly swords toward Li Yan's chest. Li Yan calmly leans back slightly to gain momentum and swings his left hand up. The Ziwu Mandarin duck axes clash against the butterfly swords, sparks flying. The sound of metal colliding echoes throughout the arena. They're in close combat. In an instant, Li Yan, with just one hand, effortlessly holds his own against Tian Tizi. He shifts the Ziwu Mandarin duck axes slightly, sliding them along the butterfly swords. Tian Tizi thinks, this is bad. His blades are strange. He uses his other broadsword to block one of the Mandarin duck axes. One weapon against two. It all comes down to skill. Tian Tz grits his teeth. He can't believe how strong Li Yan is. More importantly, Li Yan only needs to lift his wrist, and the circular blade will spin, severing his hand. The young man realizes how dangerous the weapon is. His arrogance vanishes, and he becomes cautious. He calculates his moves, trying to push down on Li Yan's weapons. But Li Yan tightens his grip, flicks his thumb, and uses Tian Tz's own force to push down on the butterfly swords. The Ziwu Mandarin duck axes, instead of being pushed back, are now pushing down on Tian Tz's butterfly swords. The outer blade of the Mandarin duck axes begins to spin. If the user isn't used to this weapon, they could easily cut themselves. If someone isn't used to this, they could easily cut their own hand. But Li Yan is very skilled. As the blade spins, his thumb retracts slightly, avoiding the inner blade. The outer blade grazes Tian Tz's hand. Tian Tz's expression doesn't change. He raises his right hand, aiming for Li Yan's neck. He lunges forward, his blade flashing. Li Yan bends backward to dodge. Tian Tz continues his assault with his butterfly swords, repeatedly striking at Li Yan's neck. This time, Li Yan raises his Ziwu Mandarin duck axes to meet the attacks. He twists his wrist, and the blades spin, evading Tian Tz's butterfly swords. Tian Tz is shocked. The Mandarin duck axes spin in midair and slice Tian Tz's other hand. Blood sprays out. Tian Tz glares at Li Yan coldly. He swings his butterfly swords, aiming for Li Yan's neck. Li Yan steps back, raising his Mandarin duck axes to block Tian Tz's strike. But it was all a feint to create an opening for Tian Tz to retreat. He looks at the bleeding wound on his hand. It's not deep. Tian Tz ignores it. This wound seems to make him even more excited. Li Yan, as always, remains calm. He looks at Tian Tz and says, "I've never seen authentic 8/broadsword technique before. It's an honor to see it today. I'm not watching for free, though. What I have are the Ziwu Mandarin duck axes. Almost unheard of in the south. Let me show you. The move I just used is called Sun and Moon Overlap." Hearing the name of the weapon, Tian Tz scoffs. "Too bad your Mandarin duck axes are only wielded with one hand. Not very authentic, is it?" Li Yan chuckles arrogantly and replies, "If I used both hands, it would be your neck bleeding, not your hand." Tian Tz laughs. "I don't think so." Tian Tz bends down and lunges forward. He lunges at Li Yan, using one of his butterfly swords to clash against Li Yan's weapon. Tian Tz exerts more force, arrogance and pride evident on his face. He spins the remaining butterfly sword in his hand and swings it towards Li Yan's neck. Dual swords against a single weapon offer a certain advantage. At this point, even if Li Yan were to move his blade, he could at most disable Tian Tz's wrist. But Tian Tz, on the other hand, has a clear shot at Li Yan's neck. Li Yan shuffles his feet, leaning back to dodge. His heart pounds in his chest. If he had tried to deflect the blade, he would be dead. This kid is no pushover. He's already managed to gain an upper hand against Li Yan's single-handed weapon. Tian Tz laughs, lunges forward, and closes in on Li Yan, forcing his swords against Li Yan's body, blocking the Mandarin duck axes. The second butterfly sword strikes, taking advantage of the situation. Li Yan is forced to take the hit. There's no way to dodge. What surprises Tian Tz even more is that Li Yan doesn't even try to dodge. He takes the blow head on. Blood pours from his arm like rain. A crimson stain colors the sky. Li Yan grits his teeth, enduring the pain. Sweat drips down his face. Tian Tz becomes even more arrogant, his eyes blazing with murderous intent. "Your left arm is injured, holding your weapon. How can you possibly beat me?" Suddenly, Li Yan shifts his footwork, his movements swift and unpredictable, like the wind sweeping across the clouds, closing in on Tian Tz. He cups his two fingers. In the blink of an eye, Tian Tz feels as if everything has gone dark. Li Yan's bandaged right hand shoots out, aiming for Tian Tz's eyes. At this moment, from the stands, Old Master Sui yells urgently. Tian Tizi. Tian Tizi instinctively dodges. He leans back. Li Yan, however, takes another step forward. Finally, Li Yan's finger connects with Tian Tizi's eye. With a simple flick, Tian Tizi's eye is destroyed. Blood streams down his face. He screams in pain. Tian Tizi howls in anger. Clutching his eye with his hands, still holding his broadswords. After all, the eyes are a weak spot on the human body. Li Yan seizes the opportunity and charges forward. Just then, the wound on his arm starts bleeding again, spasming violently. Tian Tizi clutches his head. Blood stains his fingers and hair, trickling down from his injured eye. The sight is horrifying. Tian Tizi, despite being a sheltered young man, doesn't hold back his cries of pain and anger. He refuses to give in. Li Yan clenches his jaw, gripping the wound on his left arm. He frowns and looks at Tian Tizi. That move is called Golden Needle Blindfold. Up in the stands, a woman standing next to Uncle Yu sighs in relief. She had been holding her breath. Watching the fight intently, she says to Uncle Yu, "I thought Li Yan was going to lose." Uncle Yu smiles and asks the pink-haired woman, "Army, I thought you weren't interested in watching fights? Why are you here today?" Army points to the ring and replies with a forced smile. "It's not every day you get to see the final match. Besides, you've been mentioning Li Yan to me for days." Red Ghost, who is standing nearby, rolls his eyes and temporarily shuts off his hearing, focusing on watching Li Yan. Uncle Yu takes a sip of her wine and says to Army with a smile, "It seems you've got a lot of free time lately. I'll have to give you more work." Army rests her chin on her hand and mutters, "You just like to bully me. But boss, do you think Li Yan will lose?" Uncle Yu doesn't answer, just continues drinking her wine. With evident enjoyment, Army is curious, but doesn't ask any more questions. TNTC's face is covered in blood. He's covered in blood. His left eye looks terrifying. Almost completely black. His right eye is barely open, bloodshot and swollen. He sees stars. He grits his teeth and bites his lip to keep himself from passing out. He looks at Li Yan and growls, "We're both hurt. Choose the lesser evil." He's ruthless. The 8 trigrams palm is both agile and deadly. Li Yan doesn't say a word. He won't plead with TNTC to surrender. He just stands there and says loudly, "Come." The 19-year-old is experiencing such pain for the first time. Roaring right now, loud, charged up. As if he had unleashed all of his power. The butterfly knives in his hand swung up and slashed. Li Yan's figure remains steady. Calmly used the mandarin duck blades in his left hand to block the blade of ZTNC. The butterfly knives were like cold light. One slashed towards Li Yan's heart. One slashed down to his right wrist. While Li Yan twisted his body, swaying left and right, following the movements of the double blades. To dodge, ZTNC became even more frantic, slashing fiercely at the mandarin duck blades. His speed seemed to be getting faster and faster. Li Yan was forced to fight with his left hand. The wound on his arm that had just stopped bleeding for a moment had not yet healed before it burst open, blood splattering everywhere. ZTNC seemed to become more and more frantic with each strike. Fresh blood continued to drip down from his 2 eye sockets. Gritting his teeth, Li Yan raised his blade to block the butterfly knives that were striking towards him. ZTNC adjusted the blade in his other hand. He spun the blade, choosing the right moment to catch it. And then, used both blades to continue blocking the mandarin duck blades. The double blades struck continuously. An intense sensation was transmitted with each strike. The sound of metal clashing against metal echoed repeatedly. The more Li Yan fought, the more he felt something was wrong. ZTNC's butterfly knife struck, piercing into the back of Li Yan's hand. Blood flowed in a long stream. The young man showed no fear or hesitation and continued to press forward. With a crazed smile on his face, he attacked. Like a carp leaping over the dragon gate. From below, he drew 2 long lines, slashing across Li Yan's left arm. The clothes on his body were almost completely cut. The feeling of pain spread. Li Yan gritted his teeth, looking at the 2 blades that were slashing towards him. Around his left arm, almost completely stained red with blood. ZTNC dragged a line down his arm. stopping only when it was near his shoulder. He jumped up and slashed upwards. Both left and right aimed at his neck. Blood splattered everywhere. Li Yan kicked hard at ZTNC's neck. The small figure was sent flying backwards. Both of them retreated a long distance at the same time. At this moment, Li Yan, from his left arm to his neck, had been slashed twice. The wounds were not deep, but the fresh blood flowed out more and more. Just a little bit more, and Li Yan's throat would have been slit. He coldly looked at the wound on his body. His current appearance was no different from that of the Yama King. No different at all. Li Yan burst into laughter on the stage. And ZTNC also laughed loudly. Only because of the bloody mess in his eye sockets. And the blood that stained half of his face red. When people looked at ZTNC, they felt an unfathomable sense of eeriness. 8 trigram knives. Double dragons emerging from the sea. Li Yan also took a deep breath. His expression remained as dark as ever. Looking at ZTNC with burning fighting spirit. For the first time in the arena, he gave a ferocious grin. The Wing Chun knives were truly profound. In their minds, 100 thoughts, 100 martial arts techniques. At this moment, they could only utter the same words as they charged towards each other. The blades clashed. The sound of friction rang out continuously. Mandarin duck against butterfly. Double blades, sharp weapons in between. The two moved and shifted. Li Yan both blocked and attacked, being forced closer and closer to the edge of the ring. And ZTNC's injured eyes were now even more crazed. Bloodthirsty. The double blades in his hands swung with incredible speed. In one swift motion, Li Yan twisted his wrist. The Mandarin duck blades spun, brushing past ZTNC's cheek. ZTNC was not to be outdone. His double blades attacked even more fiercely, getting closer and closer to Li Yan's heart. An extremely dangerous situation. They exchanged blows. For several rounds, sweat dripping down their noses. And Li Yan seemed to be falling into a disadvantage. His wrist moved, but the blade did not move as smoothly or as nimbly as before. Li Yan was taking advantage of ZTNC's blindness in one eye. Both sides were evenly matched. A 50-50 chance. However, ZTNC's speed of adapting to difficult weapons was faster than he had imagined. Looking at the man in front of him rushing towards him frantically, his movements were skilled in dealing with it. Li Yan couldn't help but praise. This 19-year-old was truly formidable. Once again, the two of them used their full strength, their blades clashing against each other. Li Yan forcefully pushed aside the blade in ZTNC's hand, creating an opportunity for himself to attack. Once again, Li Yan clasped his hands together, preparing to strike ZTNC with a palm strike. However, this time, his target was not the eyes, but the opponent's throat. Indeed, when facing a ruthless opponent, one shouldn't show mercy. ZTNC glared at him. This time, ZTNC's reaction speed was extremely fast. He quickly jumped back, and then leapt away. In an instant, he created a distance. A large distance between himself and Li Yan. ZTNC pointed at his eyes and laughed maniacally, saying, "I won't make the same mistake twice." Li Yan also didn't think that someone like ZTNC would make the same mistake twice. He was just creating an opportunity for himself. Li Yan silently and calmly looked at ZTNC. Then, he dropped the Zhu Mandarin duck blades from his hands. The weapons fell to the ground and bounced a few times. ZTNC completely did not expect this. And the audience sitting in the stands did not expect it either. Was Li Yan admitting defeat? However, completely contrary to their expectations, Li Yan had no intention of admitting defeat. He was just planning to use his bare hands to face the butterfly knives. The corners of ZTNC's mouth lifted into an excited smile. Then, the young man's body shot forward once more with astonishing speed. Li Yan remained calm and faced him. In the stands, Mei, sitting next to Uncle Yu, asked worriedly why he dropped his knives. Uncle Yu played with his bangs and said with a smile, "Fighting requires brains." Now that he had discarded his dual blades, Li Yan could only dodge. The blade light from ZTNC's butterfly knives flashed through the air. Li Yan was quickly forced back. More blood splattered from Li Yan's left arm. He looked extremely miserable now. Blood splattered on the ground. And ZTNC was no different. Blood continued to flow from his eyes. His eyes were now filled with red. It was as if something had exploded in his head. Extremely painful, but the angle and speed of his attacks did not decrease at all. A fierce exchange, to see who would be the first to be pushed down. Li Yan was gradually forced into a corner of the arena. Along the path they had traveled, so much blood had been spilled that it was impossible to tell whose it was. The situation became more and more dire. Behind Li Yan was the iron fence. Suddenly, Li Yan stopped, one foot still in midair, stopping just short of the edge of the arena. The audience gasped. He withdrew his foot and looked down, a cold glint flashing in his eyes. ZTNC's killing intent intensified. His dual blades attacked even faster. It was hard to believe that this was the work of a trained martial artist. At this moment, Li Yan became even calmer. A cold light flashed in his eyes as he extended his palm. His palm caught one of the blades that ZTNC had struck with. Just in time, the blood on his arm had almost dried to a dark brown. He held the double blades in his hands. Li Yan moved with incredible agility. The moment ZTNC lunged forward, he dodged to the side. ZTNC, not seeing his opponent, withdrew his blades to defend himself. Uncle Yu, observing from the stands, saw it all very clearly. Li Yan was now in ZTNC's blind spot. Butterfly knives returned, slashing backwards towards Li Yan's right hand, but suddenly stopped, aiming towards his legs and slashing down. It looked like the target was unclear, but the intention was very clear, which was to cut his legs and prevent Li Yan from lifting them. Li Yan reached out, grabbing ZTNC's knife-wielding wrist. In that instant, ZTNC thought very quickly. The only thought in his mind now was that this person had discarded his weapon and was using his bare hands. Either he would accept being stabbed in the thigh, or he would have to break his arm. Without hesitation, ZTNC retreated. Then he pulled his hand away from Li Yan. A thought suddenly flashed through ZTNC's mind. He stomped on the ground and retreated, as if he had given up on attacking with one blade and wanted to attack Li Yan's legs. His body leaned back. Suddenly, ZTNC raised his leg. Li Yan had retreated to the very corner of the arena. In addition to just now, in order to dodge the butterfly knives, his center of gravity was a little unstable. With this kick from ZTNC, he kicked him hard in the stomach, kicking him out of the arena. As expected, ZTNC still remembered the kick that Li Yan had given him in the stomach. This kick was his revenge. Li Yan was kicked out of the ring. The audience was in an uproar. Even Hong Gui and Uncle Yu were extremely surprised. Only old Master Z, who had been silently observing, suddenly had a glint in his eyes. However, at the moment when ZTNC's foot hit its target, Li Yan's heart felt as if it had fallen into an icy abyss. A sense of unease swirled wildly in his mind. No, this was a trick. This step wasn't because he had been kicked away by ZTNC, but the moment ZTNC kicked, Li Yan had also jumped back. His two legs shot towards ZTNC, clamping onto ZTNC's neck with incredible strength. And while he was still in midair, he twisted his hips sharply, pulling ZTNC with him out of the arena. His upper body arched, spinning the other man around. His knees slammed into the back of ZTNC's head. ZTNC was forcefully lifted into the air by Li Yan, suspended in midair. The butterfly knives in his hands were also sent spinning. Li Yan's face was now bruised and battered. Fresh blood flowed from his wounds. But at this moment, suppressing his opponent so handsomely, the entire audience held their breath. ZTNC glared. Streaks of blood. The remaining butterfly knife in his hand thrust upwards. Li Yan quickly extended his right hand, catching the blade. Blood gushed out, staining the bandages red. The moment it pierced through, ZTNC suddenly felt a surge of regret and wondered what he was doing. In the audience, the people sitting near the ring jumped to their feet in excitement, craning their necks over the wooden railing to get a better look. ZTNC was the first to hit the ground. Li Yan held the butterfly knife in his hand. The wound was still bleeding, staining the blade red. He sat on top of ZTNC, his face expressionless. and said, "You're quite ruthless. You don't know the meaning of rules." He pulled his hand away from the blood-soaked blade, blood gushing out. ZTNC gritted his teeth, his eyes narrowed. Blood poured from his eye sockets, filled with unwillingness. His vision began to fade. Finally, he closed his eyes and said, filled with resentment, "I lost. I was defeated fair and square." Li Yan stood up, looked down at ZTNC, and said, "Go to the hospital now and maybe you can save your other eye. You're still young. Going blind would ruin your life." The moment the match ended, the medical team rushed in with impressive speed. They were incredibly efficient and professional. Perhaps that's why Zhou Weidao, despite his injury, had been treated in time before. Li Yan paid no more attention to ZTNC. His face was expressionless, his body covered in blood. He raised his hand in the air. The audience rose to their feet as one, chanting, "Yama King, Yama King." On the stage, Uncle Yu sipped his wine leisurely, while Hong Gue, beside him, stared at the butterfly knives that lay on the ground. Just now, when Li Yan had thrown ZTNC into the air, resisting would have meant a broken neck. Not resisting would have meant falling out of the rain. Death or defeat. But in his rage, ZTNC had still attacked while in midair. Hong Gue let out a sigh. He knew he had lost. But he still chose to injure someone. Honestly, he deserved to die. Amidst the cheers and applause, Old Master Z, Li Yan's master, remained seated, leaning on his cane and looking down at the scene. Suddenly, he called out to his disciple. The disciple quickly stood up, awaiting his orders. Old Master Z continued to look at Li Yan below. His voice calm, "Take TNC to the hospital. And one more thing. From this day forward, no one from the Shangtian Wing Chun Martial Arts School is allowed to step foot in Nine Dragon City. Not even one step. Do you understand?" The disciple bowed and replied, "Yes, Master." Old Master Z fell silent, his eyes sharp, as he watched Li Yan limping below. It was impossible to know what was going through the old man's mind. Old people were hard to read. As soon as Li Yan stepped out of the arena, he heard the voice. "You have completed all the requirements of the Yama's court event. You will be logged out and returned to the real world in 10 minutes. The Wing Chun disciples quickly gathered around ZTNC, their faces etched with worry. They carried the injured man away. Li Yan really didn't hold back this time. Li Yan sat alone in a corner, refusing medical attention. He hadn't expected the event to end so abruptly, that he would have so little time to say goodbye. Li Yan wrapped the bandages on his hand. Today was Asu's first day of school. By the time he got back, he would be gone. She would be disappointed. Lost in thought, Li Yan suddenly spotted Uncle Yu leaning against a wall near the exit. Their eyes met, and then they walked past each other as if nothing had happened. Li Yan didn't turn around. Uncle Yu also remained silent. It was as if, deep down, he understood Li Yan's choice. Li Yan entered the room Judy had mentioned. The first thing he saw was a box on the table. There was a small piece of paper on top of it. Probably a note left by Judy. He opened the box. It was locked. It needed a password to open. The piece of paper on top was the password. It read, "Here's a clue for you. What I said to you when we first arrived at Victoria Peak." Li Yan racked his brains, trying his best to remember. Time passed slowly. Got it. Li Yan picked up the Ziwu Mandarin duck blades, then inserted it into the lock. He grasped the box with one hand and forcefully twisted the lock with the blade, breaking it open with brute force. If he hadn't been so pressed for time, he wouldn't have resorted to such measures. Inside the box were countless gold bars, filling the entire chest. Each bar could be exchanged for 100 Yama points, with no limit. Besides the gold, there was also a piece of paper beside the box. Li Yan picked it up and looked at it. It was something he was very familiar with. The collection of ancient novel fragments. The voice spoke again. "You have found a Yama's court token. You can use this token to initiate a Yama's court event. Or you can use it At the start of any Yama's court event. To improve your initial status. Within that event. Li Yan glanced to the side. And what do you know? There was a steaming bowl of wonton noodles on the table. Ha ha. Li Yan suddenly remembered the meal they had had that day. When he and Judy had gone to the most luxurious restaurant in Nine Dragon City. She had boldly ordered him a bowl of wonton noodles. Li Yan smiled faintly and reached out for the bowl. But before he could touch it, his entire body, including his outstretched hand, dissipated into thin air. Li Yan's existence shattered like a broken mirror, slowly cracking and disappearing. You have completed this Yama's court event. Number of Yama's court events completed. 1. Evaluation. Completion level. Excellent. There are 6 evaluation levels. Perfect. Excellent. Good. Average. Poor. And very poor. Excellent. Good. Average. Poor. And very poor. Before Li Yan's eyes, something incredibly bright shone through a hole. Like a crack in a mirror. He remained frozen in that position. As he was pulled out of the Yama's court world. Spinning. As if enveloped in a thin layer of protective air. Li Yan squinted, trying to see ahead. But everything was blurry. At that moment, memories of his time in Nine Dragon City flooded his mind. Appearing one after another. Each person, each event. Every experience he had shared. With the people he had met. And then Li Yan drifted further and further away from them. The once vivid images shattered into pieces. Around those chains. Fragments of Li Yan's memories of that Yama's court world flashed before his eyes and then vanished. It was as if the world was falling apart. Ah Su, Judy. Ah Su's mother. And even that Li Jianghu appeared. Everything shattered into fragments, transforming into specks of light. Li Yan reached out. Towards the blinding light in the distance. Leaving behind him. Nine Dragon City. Settlement process initiated. Walker's condition meets the requirements. This recovery will not consume any points. A rain of healing energy fell upon him. The bandages on Li Yan's hand slipped off. His hand, which had lost 2 fingers, was completely healed. Li Yan's current location appeared to be a gathering place for Yama's court walkers. Before him was a gate sealed with chains. From the ceiling, countless massive chains hung down. Dangling in the air, there was also an ordinary door that stood ajar. Naturally, Li Yan would step through that ordinary door. To return to his own world. Settlement report as follows. Excellent. Yama points awarded. 500, base points. 200 plus 150%. Purchase limit. 195%. Breakdown. 76 from individual actions. 30 from event completion. 30 from 3 external fragments. 9 from birdhead and 59 from killing predators. You have also obtained a Yama's court remnant. You can choose to offer it during this settlement. To increase your purchase limit. Li Yan looked at the piece of paper in his hand. And offered it without hesitation. The paper burst into flames. A blazing fire engulfed his body. You have chosen to offer the Yama's court remnant. Purchase limit increased by 10%. Current limit. 200%. Walker awarded 500 Yama points as compensation. You have exchanged 20 gold bars for 2,000 underworld points. Your current underworld points balance is 3,204. Li Diam stumbled back, as flames suddenly ignited, burning away the front of his shirt. The settlement process continued. Special reward for completing the underworld event. As this is your first time completing the underworld event, the reward will be an inheritance by default. At the same time, this inheritance cannot be traded. Suddenly, Li Diam felt a burning sensation in his chest. As the inheritance he had obtained, the 9-headed bird ignited. The 9-headed bird emerged from the flames. Before Li Diam could react, he collapsed to his knees, surrounded by falling embers. However, on the burned skin of his chest, a tattoo appeared. A 9-winged bird. The name of this inheritance is 9-headed bird. Spirit hooking spell. A permanent state has been achieved. 9 sentences of essence blood seal. Blood seal damage can kill demons and gods. The word love erodes Longho's energy. After the blood seal damage takes effect, Sentence essence power temporarily disappears. The duration of disappearance depends on the blood seal damage. Lee DM exhaled a few breaths. He felt his body changing. Then Lee DM couldn't help but jump up. Jumped up into the air, performing a set of punches like flowing water and drifting clouds. Only thing is, the power doesn't seem much different than before. Only Lee DM didn't expect too much. He raised his head and said, "I want to check my purchase rights." The voice rang out, listing the purchase rights. Note that purchases can only be made in this room. Leaving here, you cannot make purchases. A series of items were listed, transforming into a cylindrical screen of light surrounding Lee DM. He casually glanced around. There was only one item that surprised him. His sword actually appeared here. 1986, Long Tan, at the Funia building. In a training room. Hong Kai seems to be angry with the boxers under his command. I should yell louder. Are you deaf? The city has been short of talent lately. Even trash is rising to power these days. Come on, you guys. It's not like just one boxer went missing. Funia is out of talent. Did you hear that right? At this moment, one of his underlings ran in. Looking panicked. He walked towards Hong Kai. Panting as he approached him, he cupped his hands. Whispered something to Hong Kai. After hearing that, Hong Kai's face turned pale as if struck by lightning. He looked at the other person in disbelief and asked, "What happened to Tai Sui?" Countless flashes of light appeared in Lee DM's eyes. Most of them were cold weapons. Lee DM stepped towards the screen, looking at the cold weapons section. The weapons here were all very diverse. And what caught Lee DM's attention the most was that nameless Han sword? A sharp, murderous weapon. Priced at 10 points of the underworld. This item has no special attributes. It can only be carried by people. Of course, Lee DM didn't hesitate. And immediately chose to buy it. Can't bring this sword along. He regretted it to death. It would be great if he could exchange it now. 10 points of the underworld is very cheap. Lee DM reached out. A ray of light appeared in his palm, gradually merging together, forming the shape of a sword hilt. The sword slowly took shape, still as sharp as ever. Lee DM looked at the sword in his hand. A faint smoke lingered around the blade. A satisfied smile appeared on Lee DM's face. He gripped the sword hilt in his hand, flipping his wrist forward. The sword's body seemed to be humming, emitting bursts of intense sound. Lee DM is truly worthy of being a master of both spear and sword. With a single swing of the sword, a majestic aura like a swimming dragon, as if splitting the water on the ground in two. A faint glow emanated from the sword's body. She gives birth to myriad scenes. The yellow melody transforms into a dragon. I call you Yellow Dragon. Lee DM stroked the back of the sword. A line of text gently appeared. Han sword, cold heart. Besides, several weapons that he had seen appeared in this place. Only the Han sword interested him. So Lee DM went on to look at the hot weapons section. Countless types of guns appeared. All kinds of designs to choose from. Among them was the Colt M1911. A pistol. The note below it was, pistol. Very powerful, but for individuals. It's not anything too extraordinary. In the world of the underworld, you can get it for 15 points of the underworld and brain, along with 2 magazines, 1 point each. Underworld points can be exchanged for 5 magazines, unlimited quantity. Of course Lee DM would choose to buy it. Lee DM also looked at some other types. But for the most part, he didn't have any intention of choosing them. So he went on to look at other items. For example, some kind of supernatural object. Or martial arts essence. He didn't think he needed it. Anyway, his ancient martial arts proficiency was already at 83%. It was clear that he couldn't use something with a low level, like Muay Thai essence. Something that only had an effect on melee combat proficiency below 60%. Lee DM basically didn't need these things. Basically this time, he hadn't encountered many special items either. He mostly used fists and ordinary weapons. But the further he scrolled down, the more items Lee DM saw that interested him. For example, the 5th level ancient martial arts essence 8 trigram palms can increase by 10%. Melee combat proficiency. Cannot be used to break through the 78% bottleneck. No other restrictions from 10% to 90%. Can only buy one piece. Price 200 points of the underworld. Of course Li Diam chose to buy it. He looked around again. He had just seen something quite useful above. It was the second level hot weapons essence. Li Diam didn't hesitate to buy a bit of it. This thing could improve his shooting accuracy. As soon as he bought it, the essence transformed into a stream of golden light, penetrating Li Diam's body from all directions. Hot weapons proficiency unlocked. Currently at 38%. Martial arts proficiency currently at 89% plus 4%. There was no feeling of novelty at all. Li Diam suddenly remembered that kid TMV. He was stuck at 69% ancient martial arts proficiency. And he was stuck at 89%. It was really not easy to break through. Li Diam raised the pistol in his hand, aiming at the old door, locked with countless iron chains. He fired 3 shots. Although at such a long distance, shooting was smoother and he hit the target. The bullets flew towards the door, as if turning into smoke and evaporating. Not a single scratch. But anyway, it was only natural that it wouldn't be damaged. Li Diam didn't care too much about the door. It seemed that now he felt that he was much more proficient in using guns than before. Usually, it would take a long time of training to get this feeling. Li Diam holstered the gun with satisfaction. Then, he continued to look at the items he wanted to buy. Suddenly, Li Diam saw an item that startled him. He unconsciously clenched his fists. What was in front of him? It was a supernatural artifact. Specifically a Hongmen tattoo. At this moment, at the Nine Dragons camp, the sky was covered in a layer of dark gray clouds. The rain kept falling endlessly. Dutuk held an umbrella in her hand and walked silently through the rain. Water splashed up continuously. She walked up to the group of cold army men and asked where the person she mentioned was. The army pointed to a nearby house and replied, in the house right in front. Dutuk nodded, saying, okay, lead the way, and walked ahead. At this moment, the underlings behind her excitedly stepped forward. It seems they were all very reassured by Dutuk's appearance. But unexpectedly, you can only be late, but never absent. A series of gunshots rang out. Bullets flew everywhere in the hail of gunfire. Dutuk's people were almost all injured in the chaos, hastily ducking to the ground, covering their heads, while Dutuk still had her back to them. Silent. Everyone is dead. Dutuk then turned around and walked towards Army, who was kneeling on the ground in fear. At this moment, a group of people dressed in black also appeared. Because they were holding umbrellas, the water dripped down from them. Army looked at the scene before her in horror. Completely unexpected. Dutuk coldly looked at Army, who was kneeling on the ground behind her. It was Hong Kai and her group. They were just here to take care of some business, that's all. Hong Kai silently looked at Army. The people behind her held guns in their hands. Waiting for orders, Army stood up in fear and said tremblingly, Tai Sui. I really don't know what happened, it wasn't me. Tai Sui stepped forward, lifted Army's chin, and said coldly. You are my person. Of course I believe you. I remember when you first arrived in Long Tan. Any man could have a date with you for 200 NDT. Then you said you wanted to follow me. I believed you then, and I believe you today. You've been with me for so many years, how could I not believe you? Army looked fearfully at the woman in front of her and said, Tai Sui. Dutuk unexpectedly gave a slight smile, making people even more afraid. Drink some ginger tea and get some sleep alone. You worked so hard to raise your brother. I know that even if you encounter difficulties, you tell everyone. Wouldn't I help? Army was indeed just an ordinary person. Against someone like Dutuk, just a few words were enough to expose her flaws. In the rain, the Co cried out loudly, Tai Sui. They forced me. Army collapsed on the ground, rainwater falling on her. Tears streaming down her face. She sobbed and said, they kidnapped my brother. This time, Dutuk's gaze towards Army was ice cold. But there was no killing intent in them. She just asked indifferently, so you admit it? Amy looked up at Dutuk in fear. Her mind still unclear about what was happening. Suddenly, a sharp pain shot through her throat. Dutuk's attack was extremely fast. The technique was completely invisible. Amy's throat was cut by a small knife, her body collapsing to the ground. Blood gushed from her neck, mixing with the rainwater. Dutuk didn't show any pity. Looking at the corpse in front of her, she said, "Ahong, get rid of it." She walked away a little. "The others, let's go." The group of people marched back through the rain. Now only Dutuk remained motionless on the spot. The rain continued to fall, the corpses of the others lay scattered on the ground. Blood flowed from their bodies, dyeing a corner of the street red. As for Army's body, Hong Kai had already taken it away. Back to Li DM, he was currently focused on something called the Hongmen Tattoo Enhancement. Azure Dragon Scale. The Hongmen Tattoo Enhancement only had one effect, which was a 5% reduction in grenade damage, an increased wound healing speed. Price: 20 points of the underworld. The second one was Twin Dragons Crossing Rivers. Effect: 10% reduction in grenade damage, 10% increase in wound healing speed. Intimidating effect on ordinary ghosts. Price: 50 points of the underworld. Li Dian looked at a few other different tattoos. They all had quite powerful effects, but the attributes only had those two aspects, which made him hesitate a little. Finally, Li Dian's gaze locked onto a strange beast. This one had a 30% reduction in grenade damage, and a 20% increase in wound healing speed. Passive effect: 100 Ghosts Evasion. Required: 1100 points of the underworld. And purchase authority of 180% or higher. To purchase. Li Dian pondered silently. He had only just bought the essence, martial arts, and that gun. In total, it was only a little over 200. But this one was 1100 points. But Li Dian still decided to buy it. This was the most expensive among those tattoos. But Li Dian wasn't too worried about not having enough money. Around him, Li Dian seemed to have several white flames burning around his body, also accepting that thing. He chuckled, so that strange beast was called Chaos. At this moment, Li Dian remembered the time he fought against Lich Jiang Vu. There was that skill that helped Lich Jiang Vu escape death by a hair's breadth. Li Dian was quite concerned, so he immediately searched for those talismans. He scrolled through the items, and sure enough, he wasn't mistaken. A yellow talisman appeared on the screen, written in red ink. This was the yellow cloth talisman, Chi Dispersion. After cleaning the wound, using this talisman on non-disabling injuries of moderate severity, at a moderate level, would cause the wound to gradually heal. More severe injuries would not worsen due to purchase restrictions. This skill was obtained by killing the predator, and the predator had also purchased the faulty version of this product. Limited uses. Therefore, after purchasing this skill, it could only be used 20 times per underworld event. This skill could be considered quite shameless, equivalent to having a second life. It was a pity that Li Dian couldn't buy the genuine product. He could only use the faulty one. But he wasn't too picky. It was like carrying a battlefield medic. And he didn't need medicine either. Finally, there was the most common category. Gotcha. Underworld item. The item was called Underworld Story. Rated above superior. It could be purchased for 50 underworld points. Could only be purchased once. It looked like a cylindrical tea box, sealed with patterned talismans around it. And there was a laughing clown on top, looking very bizarre. Description: the great underworld, containing all things. Everything seen in the underworld is real. Break it, and you will obtain a phantom object from the story. That concludes all purchase options for this time. This purchase period lasts until before the start of the next underworld event. The desert's gift will appear when the next underworld event updates. Li Dian's current underworld points: 1400 to 1400. Li Dian looked at it and smiled helplessly. Smiling. Only allowed to buy these things and not spend points. It was also a kind of happy trouble. Besides those basic things, of course, Li Dian continued to buy cell supplements and S blood serum. Currently, Li Diem's attributes had increased significantly. He also had 2 more skills. Like killing like child's play, which hadn't been unlocked yet. Suddenly, a playful voice rang out, attracting Li Diem's attention. The clown on the gacha item after the event suddenly opened its mouth and stuck out its tongue, shaking its head and looking at Li Diem. Haha, foolish. Foolish. Li Diem frowned at it and clicked buy. He held the item in his hand. The clown continued to sway, shaking its head and foolish, foolish. Li Diem was annoyed. He clenched his hand tightly around the item. The talisman seemed to be made of paper, easily crushed. The paper slowly disintegrated. Li Diem dropped the pile of shredded paper from his hand. The clown, from beginning to end, hadn't stopped talking. Foolish, foolish, foolish. The more it spoke, the more jarring it became. The sound grew louder and more piercing, until its body slowly faded away. The clown continued to sway. Its eyes slightly opened, looking at Li Diem mockingly and laughing. Foolish. Foolish in the end. Only the clown's face remained in the light. After the clown completely disappeared, the space became much quieter. Li Diem reached out, touching the ball of light where the clown had just vanished. A piece of paper, seemingly stained with blood, appeared. On the piece of paper, there was also a drawing of a magic circle. Li Diem held it in his hand and looked at the note. This is a piece of blood-soaked black magic. Carry it with you. It will increase your immunity to black magic. Note. Galaxy Galaxy. Li Diem shook the tiny piece of paper in his hand. He knew the underworld wasn't normal, but he hadn't fully accepted it yet. He didn't overly dislike the thing in his hand. He didn't even know what it was. But since he had it, he would naturally keep it with him. Maybe he would use it someday. Now that he had finished shopping, Li Diem naturally turned his attention to other things. Li Diem slowly waded through the water towards the wooden door. The wooden door exuded an aura of mysterious danger. Li Diem reached out and opened the door. The inside seemed pitch black. He held the Han sword in his hand and cautiously stepped in. On the other side of the door was a different space. There seemed to be stairs. This was like Doraemon's magical door. Just one door could take you to another place. It looked completely ordinary from the outside, but inside was a staircase in a pitch-black space, deep and unfathomable, seemingly stretching endlessly. The space was silent. Li Diem gradually disappeared from the doorway. He slowly walked step by step on the stairs. And these stairs seemed to have something that made them glow, emitting a faint blue light. Li Diem kept walking, not knowing how long had passed. Anyway, it was a very long staircase. He looked up ahead, there seemed to be light. Finally, Li Diem reached the top of the stairs. He looked at the blinding light coming from the door. The closer Li Diem got, the brighter the light became, to the point where he couldn't look directly at it. He had to raise his hand to shield his closed eyes. In surprise, Li Diem opened his eyes in astonishment. What he saw now was a very familiar scene. Li Diem was currently lying on an old sofa. Next to him was the Han sword. On the floor were some open CD cases. The teacup on the table was still steaming, slightly damp underneath from spilled tea. On the table was a black business card. Li Diem raised his hand to his forehead and suddenly burst into laughter. He laughed more and more freely, more and more joyfully. This was the intense feeling of being alive. Time slowly passed. Another day was coming to an end. A new day was dawning at Hongjin Airport. The airport announcements echoed throughout. Attention, passengers. Flight 2030 is about to land at the airport at 8:20 p.m. Followed by another announcement in English for foreigners. Then the plane landed. The location was the ruins of the Nine Dragons camp, Li Diem's current destination. He hailed a taxi. He sat in the car, asking the driver to take him to the Longtan ruins. Feeling a bit conflicted, the driver immediately drove off. After passing through several city streets, they finally arrived, although the scenery was beautiful. Li Diem had no intention of admiring the scenery. The taxi stopped right in front of the ruins. Li Diem slowly got out of the car. The Nine Dragons camp appeared before his eyes. Like a place from decades ago. Completely unfamiliar. But coming to this place, Li Diem seemed to recall the figures of those old acquaintances. Hong Kai, Du Tuk, Judy and Ah Tu. He looked ahead silently, unsure how to face them. If he met them again. Li Diem strode into the ruins. The sky was vast and blue. In front of him was a park called Longtan, located within the ruins. At first glance, there were many people sightseeing and children playing. A bright and cheerful place. Li Diem entered this place, looking for an elderly person to inquire about things. But he couldn't find out what he wanted to know. Li Diem said earnestly, "I know that when it was handed over to the mainland government, the camp was demolished. Nobody remembers those things anymore. But I really can't remember more details." The old man looked into the distance and pondered. "Young man, are you telling a story? I've lived in this city for over a decade. There's only the committee and the security team in the city. But Tai Sui and Hua Lintang or whatever sound like something out of a movie. It was just a slum, nothing special." The old man sighed. Li Diem fell silent after hearing that. Although he was smiling, his expression was incredibly sad. A long time passed. After a long while, Li Diem slowly asked, "Sir, do you know Kong Nu Tan?" The old man nodded and smiled, "Of course I do." Then the old man pointed to a large building nearby and asked, "That building was built by her, right?" Li Diem looked at the building with joy, feeling as if a weight had been lifted off his chest. "That's right. That's right. This building belongs to Judy's company. Kung Nu Tan is her adoptive mother." Li Diem couldn't hide his joy and hastily asked, "Then her daughter?" The old man was surprisingly patient, answering properly from beginning to end. Although in this old man's eyes, Li Diem was just a strange young man. Even until Ms. Kung passed away, she didn't have any. Li Diem couldn't remember how he felt when he heard those words from the old man. In the park of the Nine Dragons camp, Li Diem sat in a small pavilion. The setting sun reflected off the water, sparkling beautifully. But Li Diem was in no mood to admire the scenery. He sat there, not knowing how much time had passed. The sound of geese honking could be heard. Li Diem tilted the beer can in his hand and drank. A few drops of beer dripped down the corner of his mouth. Li Diem didn't bother to wipe it away. He just sat silently, looking down, a little lost in thought. His eyes seemed a little red. Suddenly, Li Diem stood up unsteadily. Then he crushed the beer can in his hand. Beer splattered out, getting on his hands. But Li Diem didn't care. He threw the beer can forcefully towards the trash can, as if to vent his anger and frustration. Because nobody had opened the lid of the trash can for him to throw it in. The beer can bounced back, rolling on the ground, and hitting the foot of some chubby guy. Before stopping, a man walked up behind Li Diem, with his hands clasped behind his back, looked at him and slowly asked with a smile, "Why so agitated?" This person was Mac, the one who had brought him into the underworld. Mac walked over, looked at him, and asked with a smile. Just recovered. Li Diem turned to look at Mac, his eyes sharp, cold, and filled with undisguised displeasure. He didn't respond, just looked at Mac and asked, "Why is everything like this?" Mac chuckled, pointed to his head, and then pointed at Li Diem, thinking that humans couldn't possibly transcend time. Have you ever heard of the grandfather paradox? But it's not fake. There are two identical leaves in this world. But there are many similar leaves. If it's all a dream, how did you recover? Mac had a wicked smile on his chubby face, and continued, "Of course it's possible. What if you're still living in a dream?" Li Diem pondered and asked. Parallel world. He walked towards the railing of the pavilion, waving his index finger and saying, "Right. But not completely right. It is a parallel world. But the differences and variations between worlds are probably greater than you imagine. Many people aspire to explore the universe, but they don't even fully understand the ground beneath their feet. Nor do they have a clear understanding of reality and the countless possible futures. a great scientist who recently passed away, proposed the theory of parallel universes. He believed that in another universe, he was full of life, passionate about sports and running. What do you think? Lee DM frowned and interrupted coldly. I don't understand what you're talking about. Mac maintained the smile on his chubby face and said, as Chinese people, we say gentlemen don't discuss ghosts and gods. But suppose, just suppose, the witches who were burned at the stake in the Middle Ages possessed supernatural powers, but they were wiped out. What if a prince in the Middle Ages went mad? He declared that witches were not evil spirits, and used the power of witches to start a magical revolution, no less significant than the Industrial Revolution. Then now, your life would be completely different. This is the possibility. Lee DM nodded. I think I kind of understand. Besides, this story is quite interesting. Mac chuckled and continued. For example, starting from this moment, spiritual energy recovers. The so-called cultivation techniques are spread. The era of chi cultivation becomes a reality. Overnight, various cultivation sects emerge. The rules of the world change accordingly. The parallel worlds are no longer parallel. Lee DM looked at Mac and said coldly, if I hadn't seen it with my own eyes, I would definitely think you were lying to me. Of course, Mac understood this. People who haven't experienced it are basically like this. He didn't care too much. Therefore, the background of the underworld events has a very complex relationship to the world you know, but completely different from that world. The full name of the underworld is the Southern Underworld. The theme is the divine tree condensing into worlds. In legend, each fruit on the tree is a brand new world. And people like us are just ladybugs, flying around, sucking the nectar of the fruits, which is to traverse the underworld. Suddenly, Mac's expression turned ugly, as if he had received some news. He stood up, putting his hands in his pockets and leaning his chubby body towards Lee DM, and said, I have something urgent to attend to. Later on, you might not have the chance to meet me. Li Yan didn't ask much more about these trivial matters. He directly brought out all the questions he had about the enhancement methods of the purgatory world, such as inheritance, specialized skills. Can you explain it in more detail? Mo nodded and said, first, about inheritance in purgatory. Excluding some extremely rare types, there are a total of 10 types. Heaven, earth, human, god, devil. Naked, scale, feather, hair, and boundary purgatory inheritances. There is indeed a division of high and low. But there is no distinction between superiority and inferiority between the types. For example, the vermilion bird belongs to the feather type but is also a devil type. But the vermilion bird ranks above the feather type. Li Yan recalled the name of the inheritance that he had recently acquired, and asked, what about the 9-headed bird? Mo smiled proudly and said, this vermilion bird can't beat me now. So you don't need to worry too much about the division of high and low between inheritance types. As the awakening level of inheritance increases, the physical fitness and lifespan of the walker will also increase. As for the 10 types of inheritance, they focus on the unique aspects of each inheritance type. It goes without saying that Mo didn't have the time to explain everything because it would take too long. So he stepped forward and reached out to touch Li Yan's forehead. Li Yan felt a little dizzy, as a large amount of information was transmitted into his mind. The moments when he fought that kid Zheng Mingyuan and awakened that beast were all explained, used as examples to help him understand. Usually, awakened beasts belong to the hair type, so their recovery ability and other aspects will be significantly enhanced. The 3-headed serpent belongs to the scale type, and its own enhancement is very slow, but it has a high suppression ability against creatures of the same type. In Li Yan's mind, a blurry and illusory image appeared. It was unclear if it was the battle with Li Jianghu, as if it had been interfered with for some reason. Mo scratched his head suspiciously. That's weird. I clearly recorded the battle scene between you and Li Jianghu. Well, whatever. Forget it, this happens often anyway. Li Yan was speechless, but he didn't interrupt Mo. Mo continued to explain. And your nine-headed bird belongs to the feather type. So your speed enhancement is extremely obvious. The boundary type has a relatively balanced enhancement. The naked type belongs to the chi type, of course. That's the general situation in purgatory. There are all sorts of strange things. If one day you encounter a feather type inheritance, that's very good at taking hits. Don't be too surprised. Li Yan asked again. What do the heaven, earth, human, god, devil inheritances focus on? I'll tell you when you encounter them. If you simultaneously possess the feather and hair type inheritances, your speed and strength will be significantly enhanced. And if you possess multiple boundary type inheritances, you can become Batman. Of course. The more inheritances, the greater the investment. Li Yan pondered for a moment and asked. How to increase the awakening level? Seize the purgatory tokens with inheritance power. That's also the sweet fruit that purgatory bestows upon us bugs. We may possess multiple inheritances, but ultimately, you can only become the representative of one inheritance. When I first entered purgatory, my inheritance was the Big Dipper, a fire-wielding beast, recorded in the classic of mountains and seas. But I felt that most suited me better. After 6 purgatory events, or when the awakening level of your inheritance reaches 100%, you will have the qualification to compete for the title of the inheritance you possess. The more precious the inheritance, the more competitors there will be. If I remember correctly, there was once a woman who won this title, calling herself Shahi. Mo. A small flame appeared in Mo's hand. Then he crushed the flame in his hand, looked at Li Yan, and said with a smile, but I feel that the title of Peach Stealer or suits you better, provided you can get it. Now, about skills. There are 2 ways to obtain skills. One is to increase the awakening level of the inheritance you possess. 2 is to purchase them, but there is one thing to note. Sometimes there will be conflicts between skills, and between skills and inheritances. Purgatory will warn you about this. So pay attention. Finally, about specialization. Let's put it this way. The level of specialization of representative determines the extent to which he can unleash his true power. Both fall off a cliff and gain 65 internal strength. One is the world Sanda champion. The other is the dean of Nanshan nursing home. Who do you think will win? Inheritance is like a profession in a game. Specialization is like skill. After a long speech and easy to understand examples, Mo gave a friendly smile and asked understand. Li Yan nodded slightly. Then he asked what is a defector. Hearing this word, Mo's face turned visibly ugly. He looked at Li Yan with a wary gaze, as if he was about to silence him. He must be wondering where he had heard that word. Mo pondered for a moment and slowly said, let me tell you the rules. First, all grudges between walkers can only be settled during purgatory events. It is forbidden to use any means to interfere in the real life of other walkers. Second, no information about purgatory can be disclosed. Third, try not to use inheritances and powers that clearly do not belong to this world. If necessary, you can defend yourself, and someone will deal with the aftermath for you. But you will also be investigated. Fourth, the purgatory event occurs every 2 months. Find a secluded place. Don't scare the children. If you want to return to that room, just find an empty place and imagine it. That's all Li Yan asked in a low voice. So the rest of my life will be spent between life and death for the next 61 years. Mo laughed and said, no matter how negative you are, purgatory will not extinguish the life of anyone. However, if you want to break free from the shackles of fate, you have to risk your life. Right, I have cultivated many newcomers, but very few have achieved a high-grade evaluation on their first try recently. I've been quite lucky. I hope this luck can last for a while. After explaining and answering all sorts of questions from Li Yan, Mo returned to his previous question. Defectors are a disease, but there's only one. Then, Mo's plump figure strode through the rain. The sound of splashing rain rang out. Hope to see you again. Left alone, Li Yan fell into deep thought. This encounter with Mo had opened up a lot of things. Li Yan's old worldview completely collapsed. It had been raining for some time. Li Yan stood in the pavilion, looking out at the rain in the distance. Suddenly, a bolt of lightning flashed across the sky. It seemed that it was raining heavily in Zhulongqingjai as well. At this time, after dealing with those people, and her subordinates had left, Yusu held a black umbrella in her hand, her expression cold. Yusu suddenly spoke up. Are you not coming out? Are you waiting for me to kill myself? As soon as she finished speaking, from behind those buildings, a group of people in black cloaks walked out. Yusu frowned, her dark purple pupils staring coldly at them. The group that walked out varied in size and carried strange weapons. These people were ninjas under the jurisdiction of purgatory. The scarred man with the number 10 on his face squinted at Yusu and said with a chuckle, his voice tinged with contempt, those who abandon purgatory will eventually be abandoned by purgatory. Yusu snorted uncomfortably and retorted, you're just a bunch of kids. Aren't you ashamed to say such things? After saying that, Yusu looked at the fat man in the black cloak and said, hey, fatty, you're really something. Even Di Zhang couldn't find me. But you stumbled upon me. The fat man, who was Mo, gave a strange smile. Under this cloak, I was originally planning to cultivate a newcomer. But I never expected to catch such a big fish. Purgatory has so many fruits. I am so lucky to have found a Tai Sui. Yusu tilted her head slightly and asked coldly, her words sounding like a matter of fact. Even if you found me, what can you 11 walkers do to me? A woman stepped forward and said, we'll know after we try. Yusu let out a loud laugh. Then she tossed the black umbrella in her hand aside. Heavy rain poured down on her. She raised her arm slightly, and streaks of red blood appeared, enveloping her hand. A huge crescent moon of dark red appeared behind Yusu. The heavy rain raged on. Her long red hair fluttered in the wind. Streaks of blood from the crescent moon shot out, wreaking havoc. The pure blood red in the rain seemed to not blend with the water. Yusu let out a loud laugh. She raised both hands, her red hair flying backwards into the air. The water below automatically parted. A blood-red color enveloped the space. At this very moment, someone was bound to interrupt. And the Red Devil was the one who played that role. It was unclear why he suddenly appeared here. At this moment, hearing the familiar voice, Yusu turned her head and clicked her tongue. She looked at the Red Devil with cold eyes and asked, didn't I tell you to get lost? Why are you on the opposite side? Seeing that Yusu was distracted, the ninjas rushed towards her one after another. Each of them displayed their unique abilities, none inferior to the others. This was a battle of mortals this time. The Red Devil was afraid that he would be in deep trouble. By evening, the rain had stopped, and the bright moon hung high in the sky. At an old house in Kangzhou, sounds occasionally came from inside, as if someone was practicing martial arts. Indeed, this was Li Yan's house. He was currently practicing swordsmanship. On the table were several grenades, a gun with bullets, and a phone. Suddenly, his phone vibrated. Li Yan lowered the long sword in his hand. Li Yan answered the call. His breathing slightly rapid. Sweat dripped down, flowing over his sculpted muscles. As soon as he answered, the person on the other end asked, you sound well. Looks like you're still alive. Your illness has really improved, huh? Li Yan chuckled and replied, I'm still alive. It's not your turn to cry over me yet. By the way, how is Zhang Daojing doing? I haven't seen her in a long time. It was only when he saw Zhang Mingyuan the other day that Li Yan suddenly remembered her and asked about her. The person on the other end of the line sounded a little doubtful, but answered truthfully, I don't know about Daojing either. I heard she went to Shandong and got married many years ago. Yanzi, don't mess with me. Are you serious? Your illness can be cured with traditional Chinese medicine. Don't lie to me. But the person on the other side didn't ask further. Li Yan picked up a towel and wiped his sweat, forcing a smile as he said, I'll visit you in a while. The person on the other side said excitedly, okay, promise. I'll tell my wife to prepare a feast for you. Li Yan put the phone on the table. The person who had just called was an acquaintance of his. Li Yan picked up the gun and loaded it with bullets. The gun clicked shut. Li Yan tucked the gun into his waistband. In front of him were quite a few grenades, bullets, and the Han sword. He couldn't leave that behind. Li Yan entered a state of meditation. The atmosphere around him changed. The voice of the purgatory guide for this event rang out, "Walker, you are about to begin the purgatory event. You possess a purgatory token. You can choose to use it to replace this purgatory event. If you do not wish to replace it, you can also choose to sacrifice it to enhance your status in this purgatory event. After enhancing your status, you will receive more assistance." Li Yan chose to sacrifice. You have sacrificed Lin Yutong's manuscript. You will have a higher status. In this purgatory event, the space around Li Yan slowly changed. He closed his eyes and opened them again. The sky above him was now filled with dark clouds. Crows filled the sky. The atmosphere was gloomy and eerie. The smell of blood and corpses permeated the air. Such a vast place. And only the cawing of crows could be heard, overwhelming even the crackling of flames and the faint groans of a few survivors. It was terrifying. Red-eyed crows perched on tattered flagpoles. And corpses fighting over human flesh. And Li Yan at this moment had also been transported to the event. He suddenly opened his eyes. Li Yan was currently lying next to several other corpses. His body was covered in blood. His Han sword was still clutched tightly in his hand. Snow began to fall, biting cold. The white of the snow blended with the scarlet of the flames. Li Yan looked up at the sky. The surroundings were filled with traces of battle. He sat up in surprise and looked around. Suddenly, his shoulder twitched. A sharp pain shot through him. Li Yan looked at his hand. Fresh blood dripped from it. Li Yan stared at the blood dripping from his hand. He chuckled, seeing blood so early on. What a good omen. Let's talk a bit about the current situation in the world that Li Yan had arrived in. Toyotomi Hideyoshi, the man who ended the war in Japan, had boldly launched an attack on Joseon. The armies of the feudal lords I had trained during the Warring States period, after 100 years of preparation, had marched out. Within a month, 3 capitals and 8 provinces of Joseon had been occupied. King Xianzhou of Joseon had fled to Weiju and had requested aid from the Ming dynasty of China. The Wanli Emperor had ordered the governor of Shaanxi, Li Rusong, to assume the post of Minister of War and to lead the expeditionary force, leading 40,000 Ming troops. They crossed the Yalu River into Pyongyang. Before Li Rusong's army of 40,000 set out, the court had sent Su Qingshuan, leading over 3,000 men to Joseon to fight the which was present-day Japan. This was an era when gunpowder was still in its infancy and cold weapons still dominated the battlefield. Li Yan received the information from the event. It seemed that this event was going to be very interesting. After all, cold weapons were his forte. As for why Li Yan had appeared on a battlefield littered with corpses, it was due to Joseon's faulty intelligence, leading to a crushing defeat for the Ming army. The Imjin War was a chaotic era. The current time is 1592 to 1593. Mountains of corpses piled up on top of each other. Each body was covered in countless wounds. Some were being pecked at by crows. The smell of blood mixed with the stench of rotting corpses was horrifying. Li Yan stood up and greedily took a breath. The air was not very fresh. He had just died once. So he was a bit short of breath. A weak voice reached his ears. Li Yan looked over. Beside him was a severely wounded Wokou soldier. Without mercy, he drew his Qingwan long sword and finished him off. As the blood flowed from the soldier's body, it seemed to be affected by some mysterious force, forming words on the ground. Time: around 1592 to 1593. Location: Pyongyang. 40 degrees north latitude, 127 degrees east longitude. The requirements for this purgatory event are as follows. 1. Survive and tell the first peace talks between the 3 parties, Maine, Japan, and Joseon. 2. Find a purgatory token with the power of Nienshu. Kill at least 3 types of Japanese Warring States period beasts. Kill at least 1 Japanese Warring States period lord. Kill Konishi Yukinaga, commander of Toyotomi Hideyoshi's first army. Complete any of the above requirements. The purgatory event officially begins. Note: you owe me a life. Now I want you to repay me. Li Yan recalled the time when he had fought the 3 elders and had been struck by a blast of energy, but had not died. Thinking about it, that was the only time Besides, taking the head of the enemy commander in the midst of a massive army. This wasn't a wuxia novel. Did they think he was playing a video game? Although Li Yan was undefeated at Zhulong Chengjai, and had earned the title of Yama, and had claimed to have defeated many formidable opponents, he knew that fighting in the ring was child's play compared to real combat on the battlefield. This mission was on a completely different level from the previous one. Chaos breeds heroes. It's on the battlefield that you know who's truly skilled. But since he was here, Li Yan would give it his all. He really wanted to meet the heroes of this era. It was sure to be exciting. His current identity was that of a zhengqi, under the command of Zhu Chongshuan, a Ming general. He had 3 xiaoqi under his command, a total of over 2,000 men. In this purgatory event, Li Yan had also gained a special specialization: 70% horse riding. After the event ends, you will forget this specialization. But you can also spend 700 purgatory points to permanently acquire it. Your status has been upgraded. In this purgatory event, your current rank is zhengqi. Li Yan switched to firearms. He was holding an iron suitcase. A gift from MO. It would take 12 hours to update, so it was not yet usable. Li Yan was required to carry this firearm with him. It could not be concealed by burying it or giving it to someone else. The bullets and all remaining components would disappear once it was discarded or moved 200 meters away from him. Li Yan loaded the gun and tucked it into his clothes. The gun and grenades could only be used when the enemy was caught off guard. He couldn't rely on them too much. After all, they were only small-scale weapons. To forge iron, one must be strong oneself. On the battlefield, the crows showed no fear of the living. They gathered in swarms, filling the sky. Human flesh still clung to their beaks. Suddenly, the eyes of the crows seemed to have spotted some terrifying monster. At this moment, Li Yan was still unaware of the monster approaching. He was thinking about searching for survivors. After such a crushing defeat, it was impossible that he was the only one left alive. Suddenly, the surrounding sounds seemed to fade away. A heavy rustling sound reached his ears. Li Yan frowned and looked towards the sound. Then he activated Ginghong Yipian. On the pile of corpses, a beast. Its entire body was rotting, reeking of blood. A crunching sound came from its mouth. Every time it chewed on a bone, the arrows piercing its body, piercing through its pale ribs. This thing is called a myoho, a demonic beast, with the ability to control corpses. Unable to use mutated weapons. Teeth and claws are poisonous, threat level, light red. The monster seemed to notice Li Yan. It slowly turned its head to look at him. Its pale skull head, with 2 pitch black eye sockets, emitted a ferocious red glow. Li Yan immediately raised his gun and aimed at it. Then he pulled the trigger. 3 bullets fired in succession, hitting its eye sockets, front legs, and decaying body. The bullets embedded themselves in its rotting flesh. But the creature seemed indifferent. The bullet lodged in its head, yet it showed no sign of pain. For a split second, the bullet embedded in its pale skull was ejected from its body. The bullet clattered onto the sword. Then it sprang, dropping the arm it was holding in its mouth and charging. Li Yan's expression turned fierce. The closer he looked, the more he realized this thing was truly vicious. Li Yan holstered his gun and gripped his Qingwan long sword. His eyes fixed on the monster, observing its movements, ready to react. The monster lunged. Li Yan raised his sword, absorbing the impact on the blade. Li Yan gritted his teeth and pushed back. This creature was truly bizarre. If he hadn't seen it with his own eyes, Li Yan wouldn't have believed it. The sharp blade moved like a ship changing course on the ocean. Li Yan dropped to his knees, sliding under the monster. His sword sliced upwards from its belly, severing its throat. Blood spurted from the monster's wound. The monster roared in agony. Blood gushed out uncontrollably. Its foul-smelling mouth opened once more, lunging at Li Yan, as if trying to drag him down with it. Li Yan's expression darkened. He planted one hand on the ground, using it as leverage to push himself up. He kicked the monster hard in the stomach, where he had previously stabbed it. The monster's massive body flew backwards, crashing onto the corpses. Blood stained the ground crimson, but it still managed to stand, crawling on all fours. It looked at Li Yan with labored breaths and trembling fear. Li Yan rolled his neck. He gripped his Qinghuan longsword and strode towards the monster. He couldn't underestimate this monster. This is our world, not theirs, Li Yan. Li Yan unconsciously recalled what Mo had said. The monster gasped for air, its forelegs digging into the muddy ground. Its eyes were cold. Suddenly, its front legs exploded with power, launching its body into the air. It moved nimbly across the corpses. It was clear that it knew it couldn't defeat the enemy in front of it and was desperately trying to escape. In its path, corpses were kicked up, bouncing and falling. No peace even in death. War is truly tragic. Of course, Li Yan wasn't going to let it get away. He jumped up, stepping on the corpses it threw at him. The monster, hearing the sound, panicked and turned its head. Its crimson eyes locked onto Li Yan. Li Yan lunged. His Qinghuan longsword slashed horizontally. He roared, "You ought to run, not a chance." The Qinghuan longsword tore through the monster's flesh. Carrying an unstoppable momentum, a whirlwind of power cleaved the monster's body in two. Black blood splattered everywhere. Dancing in the air, the monster's upper body spun. Its blood-red mouth gaped open. Lunging at Li Yan, this thing is more tenacious than a leech. What a world! The beast opened its mouth. A foul stench assaulting Li Yan's nostrils. Blood seemed to spurt from its mouth. Li Yan glared at it, his eyes sharp with killing intent. The Qinghuan longsword in his hand whistled through the air. A red light seemed to emanate from Li Yan's chest. A wave of warmth spread from his heart. Sentence enhancement. 90%. The user's burst power and attack speed. The entire process was unimaginably fast. Li Yan struck the monster's head. The sharp blade cleaved its body in two effortlessly. Blood sprayed wildly from the monster. It let out a series of roars. Li Yan stared coldly ahead. The stench of blood splattered onto him. The monster, split in two, crashed to the ground. Li Yan stood silently on the battlefield. He swung his sword sharply, flinging the blood off. Snow fell silently. His shadow stretched across the ground, lying between the two halves of the monster. Li Yan touched his neck where the monster had bitten him. His hand was clean, but the itching sensation there lingered. Li Yan sheathed his sword. Where the monster's body lay, a faint line of text appeared. You have killed the Myoho beast. Purgatory event progress increased. The itching persisted. Li Yan frowned in discomfort, unable to do anything about it. He clicked his tongue and sighed, what an unlucky army. Just then, a trembling hand reached up from the ground, grasping Li Yan's leg. Li Yan reacted instantly. He turned around, his eyes filled with killing intent, ready to strike. Just as Li Yan was about to move away, an arm grabbed his leg. In the midst of the chaos, a weak voice pleaded, "Help! Help me!" Li Yan lifted the man up. Activating Jinghong Yipian, the man gasped for breath. System update. His name is Deng Tianxiang, currently in a high fever. Injured yellow turban talisman is qi draining. Li Yan opened Tianxiang's shirt, revealing a deep wound on his abdomen. Li Yan frowned, let's try this. A surge of energy flowed into Deng Tianxiang's wound, causing him to cry out in pain as he endured the forceful treatment. Fortunately, as Li Yan slowly lifted his hand from the wound, Deng Tianxiang's abdomen began to heal. He exclaimed in surprise, Taoist priest. Li Yan helped Tianxiang sit up. He asked, brother, what's your name? Tianxiang replied, Chang Wuoying 6th Unit, Lieutenant Deng Tianxiang. This brother is. Upon hearing Li Yan's reply, Chang Wuoying 2nd Unit, Zongqi Li Yan. Tianxiang immediately bowed. This humble one greets Zongqi. Li Yan helped his comrade to his feet. He looked around the battlefield and reminded Tianxiang, brother, do you know what situation we're in? I don't need to say much. Let's search around and see if there are any surviving brothers. Save those we can. Li Dian spoke calmly for a while, but didn't hear Deng Tianxiang's reply. He glanced over. As soon as he saw Deng Tianxiang's expression, Li Dian frowned and continued to advise. Our great Ming has 1,000,000 soldiers, a temporary defeat. The court will surely send reinforcements. Brother Deng, if you can survive, you can seek revenge in the future. Why are you so dejected? Tianxiang didn't say a word. Suddenly knelt down. Li Dian asked in surprise, Brother Deng, what are you doing? Tianxiang sighed, one bow was for the officer. And this bow is for my lifesaver. Deng is a rough man, I don't know how to speak eloquently. If General Tianxiang doesn't mind. This old Deng is willing to give my all. To follow your orders. Li Dian was moved by Tianxiang's sincerity. He replied, we are comrades. And today we shared life and death together. Why say such things? Let's see if we can save any more brothers. Okay. The two immediately entered the area where the corpses lay scattered. To search. Li Dian had miscalculated. The chi dispersion technique could only be used 20 times. But it had to be used when necessary. In the chaotic battle with the Oirat. The situation was extremely complex. Individual strength was too insignificant, the position of Tianqi was to give him a few dozen lazy subordinates. Who wouldn't obey orders? Or a few dozen fierce dragons and tigers? Who would fight wherever he pointed? It depended on his own abilities. Approaching a soldier. Who had been both. Stabbed by a sword and shot by an arrow, lying on the ground. Coughing violently. Li Dian thought. Now was the time to recruit some reliable Han soldiers. As comrades. He covered the brother's eyes and put a knife to his throat. Helping him pass peacefully. While doing so, he continued to analyze his situation. When it came to the reputation of the Ming army, he was just a lowly Tianqi. Probably not even as good as a groom. As Li Dian stood up to leave, another voice called out. Save me. Save me. I'm the Baihu of Changwon. He stopped and turned to look. Seeing the person lying on the ground, crying for help, Li Dian saluted. This humble general pays respects to Lord Baihu. After speaking, he quickly stood up. Don't worry, my lord. I'll rescue you immediately. With a single effort, Li Dian pushed aside the cannon barrel that was crushing the Baihu. He kept shouting. Hurry, hurry. Li Dian replied. Lord Baihu. Now our brothers are scattered by the Borat. Lord Baihu. You're probably the highest ranking officer still alive. You are the pillar of everyone. What he wanted to know was. I wonder what your next step is, my lord? What are your plans for our brothers? The Baihu immediately replied. Get that thing off me first. Call for help. I'm in so much pain. Li Dian exerted a little more force and shouted. Don't worry. The cannon barrel was pushed away. He stepped forward, treating the Baihu's leg injury. And suggested, why don't we gather our brothers and head towards the Songjin direction? To find the main army. The Baihu retorted in pain. Are you crazy? There are at least 10,000 Borat soldiers in Joseon. We'll be wiped out before we even do anything. Li Dian stopped treating the injury. His face darkened. He asked. So what do you suggest, my lord? The Baihu directly ordered. Escape first. Disguise ourselves as Joseon civilians. Make long-term plans. Long-term plans. Li Dian retorted in anger. We are the heavenly army of the Great Main. In times of war, if we cannot kill the enemy, we should at least quickly regroup with the main army. And obey orders. This behavior of yours, my lord, is somewhat cowardly. The Baihu even tried to assert his authority. What do you know about retreating to advance? Li Dian continued to persuade, his voice turning colder. My lord, are you sure you don't want to reconsider? The Baihu scolded him, insubordinate. I'm your superior. How dare you disobey orders? Li Dian hated those who didn't think about the bigger picture. He put his hand on the Baihu's neck. My lord, you really don't know what's good for you. He only had time to ask, you want? Before his neck was squeezed tightly from both sides by a terrifying force. The Baihu, with his eyes wide open, died just like that. Dian Hong witnessed the entire process. But he didn't expose it. He just reported. General Tam Chi. Li Dian closed the Baihu's eyes. He didn't turn around, just asked. What is it, brother Dian? Dian Hong hastily saluted and replied. We caught a spy. Probably an oirat. Li Dian directly ordered. If he's an oirat, just kill him. Why tell me? Dian Hon looked a bit troubled. And explained, this person was hiding in a wooden barrel. I opened the lid, and he started speaking oirat. Heavenly soldiers, spare me. Heavenly soldiers, spare me. Your humble servant is an interpreter from Hanchang Prefecture. I came to Pyongyang with my father, the deputy general. Li Dian stood before him and asked, you speak oirat? The small young man replied, since I was a child, I followed my father out to sea. Not only oirat, but also the language of the red-bearded devils. I know a little bit. This caught Li Dian's attention. He waved his hand, signaling everyone to stay calm. Then approached the young man with concern. I wonder what your name is, young man? Everyone heard the young man reply. Since I was young, I've admired Han culture. My surname is Song, my given name is Ji, because I'm the second son in the family. So I took the meaning from the phrase, respect the esteemed uncle. And named myself Song Jiangji. Li Dian sat down facing Song Jiangji. He patted the young man's shoulder and praised him. What a good name, Interpreter Song, in the heart of the enemy territory. I'm just trying to find a way to survive. We want to head south and return to the main camp. We'll have to trouble you along the way, sir. Song Jiangji nodded happily on the surface. All right. But in his heart, he was already assessing the situation. These guys were so bold. With the oirat having almost complete control of Joseon, they still wanted to return to the Ming dynasty. It was like thinking Konishi Yukinaga, who occupied Pyongyang, was dead, and now they wanted to drag him to his death. Li Dian was also wary of Song Jiangji. This guy was obviously not someone simple. Just now, he was still pretending to be polite. If he didn't behave, this guy could kill him easier than killing a chicken. So he called Dian Hung over. We're not familiar with this area. We can't survive without this person. If he dares to run, kill him. No questions asked. 10 out of 10 of those words were meant for Song Jiangji to hear. He smiled, breaking out in a cold sweat. After walking a few steps, Li Dian stopped. He looked back inside. These people are all injured. They can't fight. If we encounter the oirat, it would be all for nothing. But once they recover, their combat effectiveness will definitely be very strong. Looking up at the smoke and dust filling the sky, Li Dian sighed wearily, asserting that this war had just begun. Night had fallen. Li Dian's group made their way to a roadside hut. Song Jiangji was in charge of knocking on the door. The door creaked open, revealing half of an old man's face. The homeowner's eyes were wary. Song Jiangji greeted cheerfully, old sir. We are soldiers of the Great Main, here to fight the oirat. Before he could finish his request, the old man inside turned around to close the door. Go to another house. Don't get me involved. Li Dian put a hand to stop the door, forcing it open wider. He raised his voice and said, you can't decide that. As they entered, the old man was already holding a butcher knife, tremblingly pointing it at Li Dian. He led his group in fiercely. The old man, terrified, dropped the knife to the ground. Beside him were his wife and child. Seeing them huddled together in fear, Li Dian frowned. He motioned for Song Jiangji to explain to the old man. We are soldiers, not oirat. Our brothers are injured. We just want some hot water. We won't cause trouble. We won't kill anyone. While Song Jiangji was explaining to the old man, Li Dian turned around and asked, do any of you brothers have any silver? A voice responded. My mother made me a pure silver longevity lock. This person's name was Wang Shang. Military skills, 50%, special skill, clairvoyance and clairaudience. Or in other words, a scout. Li Dian took the silver lock. He added, look around and see if there's anything to eat. Or anything useful, bring it all here. He specifically reminded Dian Hong. If there's any silver, take some too. Figure out how much yourself. Wang Shang's longevity lock is worth a lot of money. Let's not lose out. Everyone settled into their resting place. Li Dian stood in the middle of the room, pondering. It would be very difficult to break through the siege. What will be, will be. As he was strategizing, the guard called out, Sir. He reported, there are oirat soldiers outside. A group of oirat soldiers were approaching with swords and blades. Their faces were grim, seemingly unaffected by the morning's battle. Li Dian immediately ordered, Wang Shang. Help the seriously injured brothers into the kitchen. The rest of you, down to the cellar, Dian Hong. Let's change clothes. The Oirat soldiers were getting closer and closer. Li Dian's team was also working hard to carry out their battle plan. People were changing, coordinating, and acting swiftly. As Li Dian put on the last piece of clothing, a kick burst opened the door. The Oirat soldiers swaggered in. Inside were still the old man and his family, and 3 members of Li Dian's team, waiting. The rest of the brothers were hiding in the kitchen, ready to defend, in case they were discovered. The homeowner's wife, terrified, covered her head, not daring to make a sound. Li Dian used the instantaneous tracking from his Crimson 1/. 2 ordinary Oirat soldiers, already with 70% proficiency. One was from the Kuroda Nagamasa Legion. Military skills, 70%. Special skill, stealth blade technique. The other was also from the Kuroda Nagamasa Legion. Military skills, 70%. Special skill, matchlock musket. The leading Oirat soldier pointed at Song Jiangji and shouted, "Hey, you!" He beckoned him, "Come here." As Song Jiangji walked over, Dian Hong warned him, "If you try anything funny, you'll be the first to die." The Oirat soldier, seeing Song Jiangji approaching, asked, "Do you speak Japanese?" Song Jiangji nodded and smiled, "I know a little." The Oirat soldier put his sword aside and casually asked, "Why are there so many people in your house?" He sat down at the table. Song Jiangji quickly replied, "Guests." "Guests?" The Oirat soldier looked confused, "Guests?" He grabbed a handful of nuts from the plate and chewed them casually. Not giving up, he walked over and asked Li Dian, "Hey, do you speak Japanese?" Seeing that Li Dian didn't answer, he grabbed Li Dian's collar and pulled him down, warning, "Listen here." Then, still seeing Li Dian's blank expression, he let him go and cursed him, "You idiot." But a sound from the corner of the room caught his attention. It was the old man's young daughter. The girl was still huddled in fear, watching the approaching Oirat soldier. He leered at her with a vile smile. Song Jiangji sensed the soldier's imminent depravity. He stepped forward to stop him, "I know where the food is." But the soldier drew his sword and threatened, "Get out of here," pointing the blade at Song Jiangji. His lecherous eyes still fixed on the child in the corner. Dang Tianheng was a bit outraged, as if sensing his reaction. Li Dian put a hand on Tianheng's shoulder to stop him. "She's not your daughter, why are you so worked up? Or do you think it's so easy for everyone to escape death that you can afford to play the hero?" The child, still afraid, retreated further into the corner. The 2 Oirat soldiers had slowly approached. The old man, seeing this, crawled over to stop them. Unsurprisingly, he was kicked away. The 2 Oirat soldiers, one grabbed the girl's hand, the other grabbed her clothes, ripping them apart. The sound of tearing fabric and the girl's cries echoed through the confined space. The atmosphere was suffocating. The old man, helpless, covered his head, closed his eyes, and cried out in agony. The 2 vile men continued their despicable acts. As they started undressing, even Song Jiangji couldn't bear to watch. Suddenly, the old woman rushed out with a knife. Song Jiangji gritted his teeth and cursed, "Damn you all to hell." The Oirat soldier, seeing this, drew his sword, intending to send Song Jiangji to heaven. But very quickly, his sword strike was blocked by Li Dian's hand. He controlled the soldier with one hand and held his own sword in the other. By the time the soldier realized a blade was against his neck, a chilling sound rang out. One of the 2 Oirat soldiers had been slit and died, covered in blood. The remaining soldier, seeing his comrade fall, stopped what he was doing. He charged angrily, "You bastard." Calmly, another sword strike pierced the corpse below. He even kindly reminded him, "Are you stupid?" The Oirat soldier looked at the sword blade stuck in and lifted from his comrade's neck. He reached for his gun, but he was a step too slow. Feinheng grabbed his arm and twisted his wrist forcefully. Without giving him time to think, Li Dian's sword was at his throat. Finally, a slash sent the Oirat soldier's head flying. Song Jiangji looked up in fear at the bloody head flying in an arc. He was also pinned to the ground by Li Dian. He interrogated him, "Interpreter Song, didn't I tell you not to try anything funny?" While the guards quickly disposed of the bodies, Li Dian asked Song Jiangji, Or does interpreter Song admire Han culture to the core? That even when cursing at the risk of your life, you have to use our Han language. Song Zhongji's face contorted. A stark contrast to his previous smiling demeanor, he retorted. You call yourselves heavenly soldiers? Heavenly soldiers, my ass. Every year, the court pays tribute. But what do we get in return? In return, your 3,000 soldiers suffered a crushing defeat. Usually, you all act so high and mighty. But you see our wives and daughters being raped and don't dare to say a word. The people of the Great Ming are bullied. And you just stand there and do nothing. Are the people of the Great Ming human? And the people of Joseon are not human? The more Li Diam listened to this hypocrite, the colder his gaze became. He kicked Song Ji in the stomach, sending him flying into the corner. Li Diam shouted to bring him to his senses. Is the life of a Ming person more valuable than a Joseon person? It's my turn, a lowly soldier like me, to speak. But I want to ask you. Are the lives of the Joseon people human lives? And the lives of the Ming soldiers are not human lives? He pointed at the old man and continued to interrogate Song Ji. We risk our lives to protect the people of Joseon. And you. He didn't let us into his house. A cowardly peasant. Afraid of death. Ignorant. I don't care. But I want to ask you. This bastard dared to point a knife at a Ming soldier. Why are we only begging the Orant to break into his house and rape his daughter? At this point, Li Diam swore in anger. Damn it, he slapped Song Ji again. I'm asking you. Why didn't he dare point a knife at them? The Orant you want others to respect you. To treat your life as a human life. Then you had to show them where the value of a human life lies. Li Diam's guard returned and reported. General Tom Chi. Sir. Both bodies have been thrown into the ice cellar. No trace left. A hole has been dug under the ice outside. Li Diam nodded and replied. Then we can't stay here long. He held a gun in his hand. A northeast rifle with a range of 200 meters. Requires 50% or higher military skill proficiency. Or 65% or higher firearms proficiency. Li Diam handed the gun to Wang Shane. He took it in surprise. Sir. Li Diam explained. You're the youngest among us. Take it for self-defense. And a katana from a dead Orant soldier. Li Diam asked Tian Hung. Are you comfortable using this? Tian Hung replied. I'm more comfortable with a Ming saber. An old man's voice interrupted. I can use it. When I followed General Qi, I practiced with Orant katanas in his camp. The person who just spoke up was named Du Chad. Military skills. 63%. Special skill. Killing like child's play. 92 out of 100. Li Diam read the stats and silently assessed. This was the age of cold weapons. That matchlock musket could fire 1 shot per minute at best. If a chaotic battle broke out, they would still have to rely on the weapons in their hands. Which meant that those 92 people were mostly killed by this veteran with a blade. Or even barehanded. Li Diam handed over the katana. At the same time, he remembered when he saved Du Chad. Li Diam asked with concern, Old Du. Are you seriously injured? Are you alright? Old Du grasped the katana and replied coldly. I'm fine. He drew the katana a little. The blade gleamed. This is a good blade. A guard next to him, General Tom Chi. The status of that Ronin wasn't low. Du Chad also noticed. He reported, ordinary foot soldiers would rather tie a knife to a piece of wood than use a short sword. Such a finely crafted katana is only carried by high-ranking figures in the Oirat army. What's it called? What's it called? Kiyoshi Wang Shane chuckled and added, Uncle Du. You know a lot about the Oirat. Old Du cupped his hand and shouted at him. I've been killing Oirat in my dreams. Since you were still wearing diapers. He added for the others. Compared to swordsmanship, General Li's decisiveness and efficiency are unmatched. Li Diam didn't rush to reply after hearing this. He looked at the brothers around him, entering the state of analyzing the pros and cons. Among the 3,000 soldiers led by his father, there were the elite Ludung troops. and the legendary Chief Family Army. Even with faulty intelligence and the enemy's reckless actions, they could still be defeated. The warlord's army, having gone through 100 years of the Sengoku period, indeed had its own unique qualities. Both Honda Tadakatsu and Kato Kayomesa had fallen in Japan. He looked at Song Ji, who had been sitting silently in a corner. Lee Diam asked, "Interpreter Song, we want to avoid the Oirat and head towards the Yalu River. How do we get there?" Song Ji stood up silently and scooped a ladle of water. He used his finger to make water droplets, then drew a rough map. "From here, we go around and reach the small mountain fortress. The court initially stationed about 20 men here." "About 20 men. I don't know how the Oirat have arranged their forces, but there definitely won't be many. If we can avoid them, we'll be more than halfway there." Lee Diam sighed. "It's too far to go around." Tian Hung pointed to another path and asked, "Wouldn't it be faster to go along this river?" Song Ji explained, "The riverbank is full of Oirat. If you want to go to your death, don't drag me along." Lee Diam rubbed the back of his neck, his voice weary. He asked, "I don't think the mountains are very high. Can we cross them?" Song Ji nodded. "We can try, but it's very dangerous. The chances of being discovered are high." Lee Diam replied, "A long night invites many dreams. Going around the mountains takes time and effort, that's one thing." Around the area where the interpreter pointed was all flat, open terrain. The chances of being discovered by the Oirat were indeed low. But there were cavalry among the Oirat forces. They wouldn't be able to outrun them. But crossing the mountains would not only be faster, but if they were discovered, the mountainous terrain would also be advantageous. Cavalry can't enter. We still have a chance to fight. At this moment, the old man's wife brought out a tray with food and spoke to Song Ji in Oirat. Seeing the two of them chatting, one on each side, and the wife's expression seemed troubled, Lee Diam asked, "Song Ji, what is she saying?" Song Ji replied, "This young lady says there are ghosts in the mountains." "You're really believing a child's words." Tian Hung picked up a bowl of porridge. He chuckled and said, "Ghosts? Old dang, I'm over 30 years old and I've never seen a ghost. If it's a male ghost, fine, but if it's a female ghost, hee." Uncle Du also picked up a bowl of porridge, adding to Tian Hung's words, "Ghosts and demons might be nonsense. But when a nation is about to fall, there will be monsters. There are dead people everywhere here. There might really be ghosts and demons." Lee Diam smiled, "The more ghosts, the better." After a tiring night, dawn broke. The ice on the river had melted a bit, revealing the ground below. Two corpses, one with a head, one without, were discovered by the Oirat soldiers. The red-clad leader asked his guard, "So those bastards left the group and said they would catch up with us later. Then they died. How am I going to explain this to Lord Konishi?" The guard, next to him, holding a torch, replied, "They drifted here with the ice flow. Probably killed by the Jojin rebels." Their leader analyzed. "Such a clean job of covering their tracks. Doesn't look like the work of those disorganized rebels. This is the work of a regular army." The guard asked, "Should we pursue them?" The leader bent down towards the headless corpse and praised the person who killed. "My subordinate had incredibly fast swordsmanship." After speaking, he mounted his horse and shouted, "For cavalrymen, follow me. We're going after them." Lee Diam led the remnants of his troops into the northern forest, covered in white snow this season. Suddenly, he stopped, seeing Lee Diam not moving forward. Tian Hung asked, "Sir, what's wrong?" The rest of the group also raised their guard. Lee Diam asked Tian Hung, "How long have we been walking?" Tian Hung thought for a moment and replied, "A whole day. We've already reached the mountainside." Looking at a small house ahead, Lee Diam reminded the group, "In the middle of this vast wilderness. We've walked for a whole day and reached the mountainside. There's not even any wolf dung to burn for warmth. And we come across a house. Let's go check it out." The small house had a large fence surrounding it. 2 lanterns hung at the door. As they walked through, a gentle breeze blew. As usual, Song Ji led the group forward. He knocked on the door, and this time it opened directly. Everyone saw a young woman with delicate features. She stepped out and exchanged a few words with Song Ji. Li Diam and the others didn't understand what they were saying. They only saw Song Ji turn to look at them. The young woman's eyes also gently glanced over. Li Diam and his men looked intimidating, to say the least. Wang Shang looked at the young woman in fear. He asked Uncle Du, I heard my mother say. When traveling in the snow, there's a snow demon that transforms into a woman. If you don't give in to her, she'll turn you into stone. If you have bad intentions, she'll rip out your heart and liver. Uncle Du couldn't help but snort. Don't argue with a child. Song Ji turned around and reported the situation. She says she lives alone and agrees to let us stay for the night.